since 2007, correct? And primary biology, biology, but has been really our only anatomy teacher, and that has been such a gift, has done some amazing things with our students, and that's going to be a huge hole to fill. And I think besides just regular classroom teaching, has also been working with the students on an anatomy and biology club outside of school, where they have done some great activities and brought in great speakers. And so you will be very missed. And I know you've been doing that long commute this year, so you will be excited to not be doing that next year. And Stephanie has been a Spanish teacher with us since we started together back in the old building the last year. We were at the middle school. Has taught every level of Spanish and has that gift to really reach kids, especially when they're struggling with learning a second language, and is certainly one of those teachers that students go to when they need extra support. So wasn't just teaching Spanish, but was there for students, to lots of kids in her class during lunch. They knew she cared. So I'm wishing you both the best. You are going to be very, very missed.
I'm going to chime in here, if you don't mind, as well. Both these ladies were there when I started 12 years ago at Ashland High School, and Adria welcomed me in her classroom for a number of years when she was in her anatomy classroom, where I would go in and teach a lesson on embalming. And for those who don't know, that
always fun to watch.
Always fun to watch, right? The kids were always amazed that the principal at that time, and I did it as superintendent as well, that I would come into the classroom and show them embalming techniques. And for those who don't know, my father-in-law owned a funeral home, and I worked for many years in the industry with him. So thank you, Adria. You will be sorely missed. And Kelly, you said it. You couldn't say it any better about Steph. Her love and passion for kids, and kids who are, I don't want to say fringe kids, but kids who just needed to find an adult within our buildings. And we talk a lot about having a connection. And Steph is that individual. Students connected with Stephanie, and she made it a point to find and seek out those students. And that is something I hope all of our teachers can embrace and do embrace. So Adria, 15 years, and Stephanie, 16 years. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you both on behalf of the school committee. We appreciate your service to Ashland and the impact that you had on hundreds and hundreds of students, including my own. I know you, Ms. Bedell, you had all my kids, I think, from the beginning of your career till closer to the end, or most of them anyway. And the school committee really does appreciate when I'm hearing all the longevity here, and that people come to Ashland and they stay for such a long time. It's just evidence that it's such a great community to work in, and that's because all of you. So thank you very much. And we wish you the best of luck in whatever is next.
Mr. DiGirolamo.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Congratulations to all the retirees. And I'm talking about two staff members retiring. The first is, I see it's Nancy Herson, although I was going to introduce as Nancy Benson. So Nancy, it's been a great year for Nancy. She's retiring after, I want to say 16 years. I know at Ashland, but also was married recently. So up to a great year and a great start for Nancy. So Nancy, I think, what rings about Nancy for me is just her passion for history. I think professionally, if ever I reached out and there was professional development coming up, or there was opportunity out there for staff to grow in certain areas that they were teaching, Nancy would be one of the first to reach out to me. And I think it speaks to her passion for history, and that passion definitely transferred down to the students. I think whether it's her leading the GOB and competition in the theater, whether in her many travels, she would not just teach students about the subject, but also talk about her personal experiences and relate them to those students. I think particularly stands out. I'd also like to mention, we talk about COVID in the last year and a half. I think it's been difficult, certainly, to transition when COVID hit into remote learning and all the challenges that brought. I will say that Nancy really hit that challenge head on and really stands out in terms of explored the different platforms we were using, really understood how to use Google Classroom, and created really engaging opportunities for students, which was challenging early on, point where I was asking her to share some of those things with other staff members. So facing that challenge, I think that stands out recently too. Nancy, I know I was impressed by that, and I know I appreciated it, and I know the students benefited so much from it. So I know how much that meant. I know how much you're looking forward to your retirement. I know we're looking for a house in Florida. I don't know if that's happened yet. I'm sure you have many travels planned and many places yet to see, because I know that's your passion. We are going to miss that passion in the classroom. I know I speak not just for myself, for our students, for how many people and students you've impacted in 16 years in the history department at the middle school. We'll miss you. I wish you sincerely the best of luck and safe travels to come. Congratulations. And the second retiree I'd like to talk about is Gale Forest. I started working with Gale as an assistant principal at the high school. And then when I moved to the middle school in 2013, Gale came down to be the admin assistant in our front office. And for a while was the only admin assistant in our front office. So I first would have to say I so appreciated Gale through her all of the years that she's been with me at the middle school, going on, 8 years at the middle school alone. But in those first couple of years, everything we created, everything, all the processes and protocols and documents, everything that we sat down and went through in terms of how the school year was going to start and how it was going to end, there was so much work that was involved. And Gale would always do it with a smile, no matter how much work that we needed done. And I think we all know too how important that face is in the office. I think what I know I appreciated and parents appreciated and students appreciated was just that welcoming presence in the office when students came down for whatever reason that they came down, or parents needed to dismiss a student or called with something that they needed or concern that they had. Really, Gale was that rock when you walked into the office. And I know that's something that I'm going to miss, and I know that's something that everyone is going to miss. We had a retirement gathering for Gale this week, and it was standing room only. It was great to see so many people there, and I think it speaks to the amount of people who care about and respect and appreciate what she does and what she has done for us at the middle school. So certainly from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate everything she's done for me, for the school, for our students in the school community. We are going to miss her. I think if you need her, she'll be on the beach, but we're hoping that occasionally we might see her at the middle school as well. So Gale, best of luck to you, and you know we wish you all the best, and we'll miss you. And congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, ladies, both Nancy and Gale, on behalf of the school committee. I do remember, Gale, when you were at the front of the high school when you first started, and it is so true that that smile and happy face when you walk in makes a huge difference. And seeing you around, Nancy, all those years, thank you both for everything you've done for Ashland, and wishing you both a very happy retirement.
Thank you. Ms. Silva, the final retiree of the evening? Not you, but honoring.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Adams. I'd like to honor Jeannie Nisbet, who has served as, and she isn't here this evening, I don't see.
Yep.
But for people who don't know, she has served as one of the SPED administrators in 3 different buildings through her time here in Ashland, originally starting at the high school level, but then also working at the middle school and at Mendez. However, because the SPED leadership team is such a good collaborative team, Ms. Nisbet exemplified that ability to pitch in and help out at every level. She enjoyed tremendously making sure that all students were getting what they needed and collaborating with the families so that students had the best possible services that Ashland could offer. It's one of the most difficult jobs in the district, and I thought that and still believe that Jeannie absolutely showed how to do the job with collaboration, professionalism, and truly student-centered approach to problem solving. She'll be missed incredibly, but I know that she's very excited as she moves up to Maine and gets to enjoy a different pace of life and grandchildren, and that next phase of walking along a beach and not worrying about whether or not timelines were met and documents were finished. So from that perspective, I know she'll enjoy very much the change that her next life phase is going to bring her. But from the leadership team, I know that she will be incredibly missed.
And I'm just going to throw in a real small comment about Jeannie. Actually, she and I go back almost 20 years when I coached her sons at Marlboro High School, who are now parents. And so she's a grandparent, her and her husband, Mike. So she'll be, as Kathy said, sorely missed as well. And I appreciated the opportunity to work with her on a collegial level versus just being a parent that she yelled at when I was coaching. So it all works out in the end. I got to yell at her as her boss eventually. So the tides turned. So I think that is it, all 11. So anyone need to say anything?
No, but Jeannie, if you're watching, on behalf of the school committee, thank you very much and good luck in whatever is next. Any other comments on that? And no, anyone who jumped onto this meeting for this purpose does not need to hang around, and you can feel free to make your exit. And I am going, good luck, everybody. Thank you for everything. Congratulations on your retirement. You'll get your plates from Jim.
Yes.
Next up, we have time for public comment. So if there's anybody here from the community that would like to offer comment this evening, now is the time to do that. I see one hand up. I'm just going to see if there are others, Mark, before I call on you, just to make sure that I see everybody. Okay, we will start with you, Mark. You can unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, I thank you. Great beginning there with the retirees and what they did and how they shaped up the children of the future. That was great to see. I'd like to thank this 3 minutes, gonna be quick, to the school committee, Mr. Adams, the school district, and all of DESA. We now have seen the light of the tunnel for the COVID. And what made me say that is that me and my dad got our second shots. And in 2 weeks, I might be halting to school again, which makes Mr. Adams really happy. And those walls are going to be guarded again. But I'd like to say maybe, since we be quick, and I know I'm trying to make it good. I think the town should award between you, the school committee, the school district, the town hall, and all involved, Ed Berman, all involved in a gigantic thank you and industrious parade sort of thing to say COVID did not hurt this town. It made our town better and stronger. So True Blue and COVID's going to be gone too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was really kind of you. Anybody else before I move on to our agenda, the next item on our agenda? Okay, seeing none. Jim?
Yes, thank
You're up.
you. And thanks, Mark, for those kind words. I'm going to share my screen now for our weekly COVID information. What you'll notice is that we, unlike a couple weeks ago when I shared for the first time, we didn't have any cases in town. I spoke a little too quickly, knock on wood, et cetera. But that being said, we're still in talking to Ed and Audrey, and we're still in tremendous shape as a community. And what you'll notice is the context is what's important. Compared to going back last week, 4 of the 5 cases were in one house. There were 5 cases, you'll notice the 29th and the 30th. That's all from a social gathering of people who were not vaccinated, as well as it impacted 3 of our students at the school system. So those numbers are pretty isolated to some, small groups of individuals. So, in terms of the COVID and the spread of COVID, it's not this widespread, anymore. And that being said, our numbers are still continuing to be in pretty good shape. We moved back to green based on the metrics of the state. And that's because of the number of cases over this 14-day period is up to 14. But if you talk to all the principals, I think they're very pleased with how school has been operating since early April. And it's, I was talking to a number of teachers yesterday. I've been so pleased the fact that our teachers can make connections again with kids, and have been making those connections as we wrap up the year. Senior class day today, while it was a different class day, it was great to see the seniors coming in and getting acknowledged. It was great that they had their prom. It's great that tomorrow they're having a class trip. The things that we used to do. And if you were to ask me back in August, September, do I think we would have been able to pull these things off? The answer probably would have been a resounding no. But with the steadfast approach to how we did things here in Ashland, but also at the state level, we've been able to ensure that our students and our community could have a sense of normalcy at the end of the school year, which I'm very proud of. So really no changes for next week. Obviously we have 1 full week to go, and I think we can get through it without having to move into any other, or ask the state to allow us to move into any other learning model, which they would deny anyway. So questions on the weekly case analysis? I mean, we've seen it 38 times, I think.
Questions, comments?
Jim, I do have a question beyond this. I don't know if you have more on COVID. Do you have more on COVID before we move on?
Other than that, our pool testing again this week was negative with the largest group we've had, because it included all the seniors and the senior week activities, and that was a requirement. And we will continue it. I've been working with Audrey. While school ends on the 17th or the 16th, we still will have student athletes playing sports, and we're going to have at least 1 more week of COVID testing during that shortened week. So
the only COVID related thing I guess I was thinking about is, as we know, the state came out with guidance for this year and also looking to next year. And I know it's June, but one of the things I guess that I was thinking about is, you don't know what the guidance is going to be from the state for the ages of kids who are not able to get vaccinated yet, assuming that doesn't change.
Right.
But also I took note of some information you circulated a few days ago about the percentage of students in Ashland and other communities that are between 12 and 18 that have or haven't been vaccinated, and saw that our numbers were lower than most of the other communities that are part. And so I'm just wondering, thoughts about any messages that can be sent now to try to encourage people to get vaccinated for the fall. I mean, the last thing I want to have to do is think about continuing masks in the fall because, only 50% of our kids are vaccinated or something like that. So I don't know if you had any thoughts about or any plans to send out something at the end of the year saying, look, you got the summer, you got a few months, plenty of time to get vaccinated if you're going to, maybe something that factors in how we approach the fall without making any commitments on it.
Yeah, I'm actually, because you brought it up, I'm going to share that, Mark, if you don't mind, because I think it's important for folks to see this. this is what Mark was referring to. Let me close this down. That some data came out a week ago with regard to our towns, the 7-town collaborative of the vaccine clinics that we were providing. And Ashland, as you can see from a student perspective, is quite low compared to some of the other districts that are participating. So fully vaccinated students have about a 51% clip, but it goes as high as 80% in Southborough, Westborough 75%. I think, Mark, from what I've heard, we'll see these numbers actually increase over the next couple weeks. And in the messaging that I think is important is, unlike these communities, we do have a more diverse community than all of those other towns. We're the largest community as well. And what we need to be thinking about is how to direct our attention and messaging to those families that might not otherwise understand the messaging in English. So our Portuguese speaking families, right? Which is our heaviest population in terms of non-English speakers. How are we relaying that message? And the targeted approach to that will occur, yes, to answer your question. But that's really the crux of what my concern was when I first saw the data, was that we are a more diverse community, and is the messaging getting to our most vulnerable populations, and that includes our L population, right? And how we can do that. So, but
are there any more clinics planned, Jim, or are people?
Well, today was the second. Well, today was the second day of the shot of the initial clinic, and when I was there, I saw numerous Ashland students. But that being said, there are also a number of families who have stated that their kids had COVID and they're just not going to get the shot. And I don't know what percentage that is, but we've had a high percentage within the community that have contracted COVID, right? So how are they approaching the shots? I don't know. But yes, more messaging will occur. Laurie, to your question, they're closing down a lot of those clinics and then just focusing on high needs areas, or at least across the state. So.
Thank you.
But it's a good question. It's how do we get that number up? But to your point also, Mark, the state has basically said middle school and up do not need to wear masks.
Well, they said that they're not requiring it in the fall, but it doesn't mean
Correct.
the school committee couldn't.
That's right.
So that, I mean, that's what I don't want to. Where I'm thinking about is, if the school committee, and we haven't talked about it, I'm not looking to talk about it, but if we were going to be taking a policy issue in the fall,
right.
One of the factors that may be relevant to our consideration is, where are we in terms of overall vaccination rates? If we're 95%,
Sure. Right.
Doesn't make that much sense to worry about that. If we're at 60%, that might be a different story. And so I know, I know there's some people that have voiced to me concern at the younger ages because the state has not been clear on what they're going to do there yet. But assuming that vaccination is not available for 2 to 11-year-olds yet, parents want to make sure their kids are masked and that other kids are masked. So we may have to deal with that at some point, and we're not there yet. But to me, it may be a relevant factor in terms of how we approach things in the fall,
Sure.
as to what the general vaccination rate is in the community among kids.
What I'm going to ask for is some time to not worry about this.
Understood.
To be honest with you, I think every one of us needs to not worry about masks right now, at least for the mid-July.
Yeah, I mean, the concern, the point I'm thinking about is, what I don't want to do if we're taking this issue up is take it up 2 weeks before school.
Understood.
And people say, if I had known, I would have taken care of it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. But that's it. That's all I have for the COVID piece. There are other COVID components, but that deals with finances later. So.
Okay, if there are no further questions or comments on that, we will move on to the school improvement plan part of our meeting. And it looks like we're starting with the Mendez School Improvement Plan. So Claudia,
Good evening. Well, I am excited to be here to present our plan to you. I'm excited about our goals. I think it's always, it's always a good practice to think about where you've been and where you want to get to. And I think that's one of the great things that school improvement plans do for us. So I am going to share my screen. Go back to the beginning. I do apologize. I had some of my bubble dates were not corrected. So I did go back and correct those and forward the fresh copy to Karen Johnson for the minutes. All right, so goal number 1 for us is to by June of 2022, all students identified with social emotional concerns will have a plan that has been implemented to support their needs. So obviously you all well know that the district values the social emotional health and well-being of our students and our staff for that matter. And over the last several years, we've been looking for ways to, measure their well-being, and then we can target that and help them, particularly our at-risk students, of course. So this year, through the leadership of my counselors and Ms. Cutler, we have decided that we were going to use a new tool next year called the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment, which will provide, initially we'll use the mini version of it, and that provides a single number about for their competencies overall. And it shows us who's at risk so that then we can target those students. And the first step in targeting those students will be to give them the full assessment. This measures 8 key social emotional competencies identified in research literature, and that predict is essential to a child's success in school and in life. The other tool that we've used now for several years is a simple Google form that asks students to give someone an adult that they trust. Who's their trusted adult at school? And as you know, really, you don't have to have 10 people that are there for you. You only need a few. And we want to make sure that every student has a trusted adult. So we do ask them to fill out that form. And then as a clinical team, we create plans for how we are going to reach students who, in this case, don't score high on the Devereaux assessment, or who don't have a trusted adult at school. And we work to make sure that everyone has one. And the clinical team just happens to be our school counselors, our school psychologists, which we will have 1.5 of next year, myself and the assistant principal. So this is critical. I think that we've found it, it's not always the classroom teacher. Often it is the classroom teacher, but sometimes it's other adults in the building. And I know I have felt this to be very rewarding because, it's nice to reach out to students who need somebody at school. So I'm excited to have this additional tool in place for next year. Our goal number 2 for June of 2023, Mendez will develop a unified, progressive, student-centered, rigorous, relationship-rich vision and school learning model. So this was one of the many things that was interrupted by the pandemic in terms of as we moved away from the multi-grade, the 2 different programs, this year it was kind of abruptly that it was done. And we weren't able to really do some of the things that we wanted to do to continue to bring those relationships and that mentoring and provide students with the many experiences that provide such a positive school experience and set them up for good learning. And certainly, a big piece of that, right, was the equity piece. And so as through the years, as the Ashland's community has changed and it has become more diverse, we found that equitably, the multi-grade program and the single graded program had also diverged a bit. And so it became important to make sure that we address those concerns. I'm excited to say too that one of the things we'll be able to bring back next year are school-wide programs. During the whole time that we looked at the program through the program review process, we were able to see that one of the most powerful things that everyone found about the school environment was the times that we came together as a whole school community. So we will bring those back. I don't know if I should mention this yet, but we actually, I've been in conversations with our PE teachers, and we haven't been able to do many things in the woods behind the school where we've done so many had so many great events. In the fall, we hope to, before they begin construction of the new school and close that area out, we hope to have our final mud run. So I know that I'm pretty excited about that so that will probably be one of our school-wide events. And I hope no children are watching this, because I really thought it would be a great surprise in the fall. Moving on to goal number 3 here. Yep. So there's another incorrect date. I apologize. So, this one is really dear to my heart, I have to say. Certainly all of us have learned some things during the pandemic, and some things have become very clearer, much clearer. So by June of 2022, we will have developed additional structures to increase engagement with families whose first language is not English. So, we've really been working to do that right along. But this year, it became so clear to me that everything we're doing is just not enough, that students of our whose families are not first language English are faced with additional problems. We saw this with our attendance, because lots of times their families have jobs that require them to go out into the workforce when some of us were able to stay at home. And so they often ended up quarantined more frequently. Sometimes we struggle with how to reach them in terms of what communication tool is best. So we're going to look to improve upon that. And many times we used an app called WhatsApp. Is that what the district should be using? So these are all things that we're going to explore. The other thing that we're going to do is create sort of a cheat sheet for families. We used to do that really for everyone, but we need to do it for our families whose first language is not English, and make sure that they know where to go, who to call, how to reach teachers, how to reach myself or the administrative assistants or the nurse. And we need to make sure that these things are easily understandable to them, that they can negotiate a school day for their children and an education for their children easily. I think one of the things that really struck me this year was a conversation that I had with Mrs. Girardi, one of our EL teachers. And she and I would sit and talk about the struggles sometimes, and how can we do better? What do we need to do? And one thing too is helping our families see that, she said to me, Claudia, one day she said, Claudia, some of our families are so grateful to be in this country and to have their children in our schools that they're not worried about the other aspects or about anything beyond that, their gratitude is just for being here. And, we take so much for granted about the life that we live and what's available to our children, and that we teach our children for the most part to dream and about all that they could possibly be. And we need to do a better job for our students, our diverse students. So that's really, the meat of this goal is really to try to do better and help them believe that they can be whatever they can dream, just like every other child in our school. And finally, our goal for number 4, the educator excellence goal, is to effectively utilize the workshop model within their literacy instructional block. So our teaching staff, as you know, have been working on that for a couple of years. We've made progress this year in spite of the challenges they have faced. I feel that our, the model that we use where the students received ELA and literacy has certainly been, I think, very productive and helped our students perform well. We are, I wanted to just look at a couple of things. I can tell you that what we've seen so far with what teachers have been able to do with Lucy Calkins is, I know Dr. Kyra mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that our 4th grade teachers in particular mentioned that students were really happy to write and felt like they had the tools to do that. We have students writing persuasive essays. This week, I gave one class an extra half hour of recess because one of the students had written me a persuasive essay about why they should have an extra recess. So I got quite the round of cheers and applause when I said that thanks to him, they were going to receive that. And then, watching students too in their book clubs and talking about, today a teacher was telling me about how they are excited to be choosing their own books and how they didn't always have that with Journeys. So we're continuing with that. We have Claire Landrigan for this coming year, and we are going to be surveying teachers. We are re-implementing, hopefully, common planning time so that the grade level teams can work together. And we are looking to see our literacy blocks filled with mini lessons, small group conferencing, and in their weekly instruction. And so all of that, of course, we will follow with our observations. And finally, this year, grades 4 and 5 will have completed 1 full year of their units of study curriculum. As of now, they used some of the 3rd grade curriculum to introduce the units of study, the workshop model, to their students. So this will be their first year. So we look for that to be a successful completion of 1 year. So I don't know if anyone has any questions for me. I think
actually, it's kind of, it's about something you said. I think it's related to goal number 3. And I don't know, it's not necessarily directed at you, maybe to Jim and Mike as well. It's, I think, what that goal kind of ties into some district level strategies too. But I think it was a really good comment you received, or insightful, that part of the engagement problem we might have is just the gratefulness to be in a better situation than potentially the parents were, wherever they came from for certain groups. So and I would imagine also, if they didn't have a great educational environment themselves, that maybe they also might feel intimidated or unsure how to engage us. So I guess, is there anything that you or Jim or Mike were doing at a district level to help that out? Because I think that is a really insightful comment about, they're already grateful. There might be some that are like, listen, I've already done it. I got my kid into the school, and they might also be not sure that they can contribute, but we want them engaged. So are there strategies or groups we can engage to help with that engagement model for those that fall into those categories or situations?
Well, I think, one thing certainly is our employment efforts, and, which we will continue to do, to hire so that our children are, from diverse backgrounds can see educators and imagine themselves as teachers and beyond. So I think that's certainly a critical one. And then, I think the communication too is just key, because I think with any good, strong communication, I think it and engaging the families will ultimately keep their students engaged. And then in our literature, certainly I know that we've made a great effort to purchase books with our new program that support the diverse population that we have, and they see themselves in the books. So, those are certainly a couple of ways, but ultimately I think we have to get our families engaged, knowing that we want to hear from them and we want their input.
Yeah, because I think the tools you're talking about, and basically your comment wouldn't matter how well we're communicating, right? And that's the difference in what I'm talking about is we could be communicating exceptionally well and efficient, but how do we change the mindset or properly engage the people in the situation you described where, hey, they are happy that they're just here, and they how do we get them engaged more, even if we're communicating very well? How do we change that mindset and engage them, particularly if they don't feel, if they changed and came here for a better opportunity for their child and are happy, that probably means they haven't gone through a situation like this, and they might feel intimidated or not sure how to engage us, no matter how we're communicating. So how do we change that mindset and get them in our doors?
Yeah, I do think, we haven't maxed out our ability to communicate or our effective communication yet. I do think that's important. I think that, when I put something into Google Translate and send it out, that's something, but is that the best we can do? Is that the best tool for communication? Is it, I don't think it is. And I think that we have to do better, even just with the communication, because if we're not communicating, we can't really build on that, right? We can't engage them better if we're not communicating effectively. So
yeah, no, I didn't mean that we were maxed out. I'm saying even if we achieve that goal to the highest level we can, there might still be a gap based on the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that, yes.
And to that point, I guess I would just add, I've been thinking about this for years, because I know, and it goes along with the efforts that we just made through the communication survey that we did and the person that we hired and the way that our district is changing. And I agree with everything that's been said, but I think there's a little bit of a layer to it. And this comes a little bit from my personal, my profession. In my professional life, I've worked with a lot of immigrants. And I think we also need to be thinking, where do we need to change our mindset? It's not all about, getting everybody to understand that this is how we do it. And we obviously want everyone to feel welcome and make every possible effort to engage people. But I think there's also kind of an understanding if that there are parts of that aren't wanted or needed, or, is there some kind of cultural understanding that we need to develop at least a little bit, so that it's not all about, let us convince you why you need to care more and be involved more. We have to do everything we need to do to reach out and to make those opportunities available. But I do think that there's a piece of it, and I've talked to these individuals, and I'm not saying that's how everybody in the district feels. I'm quite sure that it's probably all over the place, but I would say that there are people that whatever we say, whatever we do, it's not a priority for them for a number of different reasons. And it doesn't mean that they're doing anything wrong. Doesn't mean that we're doing anything wrong. And I just wanted to put that out there. There's no real solution to that, but I just think it's important that that if there are areas where we can learn and grow about this, based on that comment that you got, Claudia, I've heard that before myself, and on different versions of that, for many years. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, Lori, we did talk about that, and it was clear to me that I had some of that in the conversation that I had with the teacher that day, that I had some of those cultural prejudices that I had to overcome, right? That just because this is what I thought was best, that it isn't necessarily the case. And that I absolutely agree that that's a piece of it, is that we have to be aware that we do, at least I certainly do have some biases in that area about what I think is best for families and for children, and that we have to be sensitive to that and understand that you're right. It isn't always about any communication or anything else. It's different. That's all. It's different than what I might think is the better way.
I just want to echo what Lori said as well too, and kind of piggyback on this conversation. I think, so many different cultures have such a very different relationship with the education system. And so understanding, kind of where our families are, where some of the families in the district are at, like Lori said, I think changing our mindset about how to connect with them and what that looks like and what that means for them. I do have a question on a different goal though, if it's okay. I don't know if anybody wanted to talk about this one more, but looking at goal number 4, in terms of the implementation of the workshop model and kind of continuing work on that. It's a similar question that I had for Mr. Regan when he was going over the goal in this area for Warren in terms of data collection. So obviously, we're implementing a new program for literacy, presumably with the intention of improving literacy within the district. And obviously, within literacy, there are a number of different domains, that kids and skills that kids need to strengthen. So I'm curious how we're keeping data, not so much in terms of how this specific program is being implemented, but whether or not this specific program is actually meeting the goals that we hoped it would meet in terms of improving literacy in the district.
Right. Well, we do a couple of things. We certainly use the BAS 3 times a year, or at least twice a year. So if a student is really on grade level, we assess them twice a year, at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. And then if we have concerns around that student, then we'll assess them 3 times, once mid-year. So we do have our BAS to follow, and then we also use iReady. So iReady is again a diagnostic, and it also provides instructional tools that can support students who have particular areas where they might need some additional tools and some additional instruction. And so we use that 3 times a year for everyone. We're just kind of finishing up with both of those assessments. They are the iReady we actually use for math as well. What I was thinking about today, right now, last year we didn't have any end of the year assessment tools really. So I am beginning to look at, as we finish up with the iReady in particular and the BAS, the current 5th grade, we do have 3rd grade results from those students. So looking at where those students were in 3rd grade and where they are in 5th grade in what we hope is the end of a pandemic, right? And potentially being able to kind of compare what's happened with them during these difficult, a pretty significant portion of their 3, 4, 5 careers that was impacted by a pandemic. So we do have that. Unfortunately, we will not have MCAS for until the fall. And again, we'll have it for the students who are now in grade 5, we will have their grade 3 results to look at as well. But even though I was talking with someone today saying, well, even MCAS, it was very different this year, right? There was, instead of 2 days of testing for each content area, we had 1 day of testing for each content area. We had probably, less time involved in addition to the reduction by half. So those are some tools that we have that we use regularly, and then hopefully, we'll be able to look more closely next year when we have a full year under our belt of what I would call a normal implementation of a new program, right?
Yeah. And now what about, I know, one of the things that Mr. Regan mentioned, at Warren, they're using foundations. And I know that there is a, a 3 to 5 program for foundations as well too. I don't think that's yet being implemented at Mendez. It may be part of the plan, but I guess, kind of my question is, coming out of Warren, obviously, in 3rd grade, phonics starts to wean out of the curriculum at that point. And that's often when you see a lot of kids crop up with reading struggles, right? And so I didn't know if there was any assessment other than the iReady that may kind of look at some of those phonics skills to just assess where kids are at with that as they're coming out. And that may be done at Warren at the end, kind of, especially with the new programming there. But just curious if there's any investigation of some of those skills at Mendez.
Yeah, so I mean, we are
If I
very
may-
excited to have the Warren School, start to use foundations. Our 3rd grade team will start to use it not this fall, but a year from now. And then in the meantime, we catch kids basically in the RTI process. And if a teacher brings a student to the RTI process, that's where we do additional assessments. If literacy is the area of particular concern, we do have literacy assessments that we do at that time.
Do some of those for RTI look specifically at issues like phonemic awareness and phonics, or is it a more general reading assessment?
It can be both, that we sometimes will use specific tools to determine, where a student has some struggles. And then there's also some more generalized tools as well. And I can certainly get you some information on those if you would like.
That's fine. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the information. It's helpful.
If I can pop in quickly, one of the things that we're excited about too is that we have, as a state, obviously now looking at the dyslexia screening tool and what we're utilizing across the board in our district. So right now we've used DIBELS at the elementary level for a long time, but we're talking about whether or not we can incorporate something such as the RAN to allow for an even greater amount of assessment for students, especially as they get older. So the RAN can be used at grade 3 and grade 4 to provide us with some good solid information for students who are struggling in the area of phonemic awareness. And that's something that we're going to start to use. Ms. Silver and I have recently talked about that, and to ensure that utilizing an assessment tool that's typically been used for special education students will not impact our ability to assess a student who is deemed appropriate for further assessment, and utilizing the RAN won't do that to us. It won't have any harm there. So we're excited to be able to incorporate that. And just in terms of that BAS model, I think what will be really interesting for us is to be able to look at growth. Obviously, we don't have all of the data that we want, but what we will have is a general semblance of how students were growing comparatively between programming. How did they do in the 3rd grade when they were utilizing a mishmash of different tools? And then how were they growing in 3rd grade on average when we were using our units of study? And I think that's something that we really want to pay close attention to. And next year might not be the best information. It might not give us all we want, but I think in 2 and 3 years, as I said last time with talking about the Warren, that's when we're really going to start to find out the efficacy of this programming. So we're excited about that. But next year we need to start. We just start comparing the growth measures of how students were doing between fall BAS and spring BAS with the instructional methodology that we're putting forward.
Great. Thank you.
Well, actually, one of our special educators went down to Warren one day and did some literacy assessments on students so that we could be better prepared for the students coming up. So, which was a great idea. I think Pete and I were excited about that idea.
Any other questions for Claudia? Comments? Okay, great work. Mendez School Site Council, thank you. And we will move on to the Middle School Site Council School Improvement Plan.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me, everyone. I am going to share screen, hopefully. I'm hoping everybody can see that. I'll just move down to goal 1. Okay, to talk about our improvement plan, the first goal is really centered around student achievement, provide an equitable and challenging environment for all of our students. In the past, what we focused on, and when I say in the past, up until last year with COVID and MCAS being canceled, so now we have obviously the MCAS of 2 years ago, and Claudia mentioned right now we're taking actually our math MCAS, and we finish up with science MCAS for our 8th graders next week. But it was great each year for the middle school. We really did focus on growth from year to year for our students in math and ELA. So we would do that with our students, our overall student population, but we also looked at our student growth by subgroups as well. So we would look at the performance of our high need students, our special education students, our EL students, our Title I students, what have you. So it was great each year to have those growth numbers and focus on either the curriculum areas, to focus on those students who were not growing at the level that we wanted them to grow, that achieved low growth, as well as look at students overall who weren't meeting expectations, right? We're not meeting expectations or even partially meeting expectations. So I think we missed having that from last year. And again, I know Claudia, you mentioned it as well. This year we have one session, and it was random in terms of what students were assigned. So we are going to get some data moving forward for next year. It's just not typically what we would have. So really looking at the MCAS that we're taking now into next year is, our focus really is going to be just overall student performance, even with the limited information that we do have, given that they just took the one session. So I think we talked a lot about that, really still looking at that data, although not focusing, of course, as much on growth as overall performance, and still focusing on those students and supporting on those students who need to improve, that we want to continue to see that improvement from year to year. So those are the data points that we look at. And again, for all students as well as subgroup students. We did just mention in some of the action items about this school year, I thought it was important, and we thought it was important to focus on what were some of the positive impacts of this year. And, you have to look for them, right? But I think there was a lot of positives in terms of teachers using Google Suites and students utilizing Google Suites, or just some of the instructional platforms that we used. I surveyed teachers. It was really interesting, everyone using Google, but just some of the other platforms, like I mentioned in there, whether it be Edpuzzle or Newsella or Pear Deck, what have you, Nearpod. There's so many of them. Teachers having access to all of them. We had teachers using all of them, some of them, but it really wasn't like teachers were using just one of those platforms. I mean, as a building, we were using all of the platforms, although not every department was using every platform. So they used what they felt was best for them individually as a teacher, but many of the departments felt that there was a certain platform that they found particularly useful. So to mention that, because I think moving forward until next year, to continue to use those aspects of those platforms that we do find beneficial, that did help students, that did provide additional resources and support when we had the unique year that we did have. So if you look through, those are just some of the things that we talked about and mentioned, and that we're going to look forward to next year as to what was impactful and what we want to continue to use, knowing and hoping everything is back to normal. And we look forward to seeing our classrooms, what we would call a normal classroom setup. I mentioned MCAS testing there. Science we take next week, and we will be analyzing that MCAS data. I think it's important we get that data. One of the things that we've been doing at the middle school year after year is creating ISSPs, individualized student success plans based on that data. Again, student performance as well as student growth from one year to the next. So those success plans were created for those students who are not meeting expectations, or there was concerns around growth from one year to the next. So that is something we look forward to doing in the fall. It'll just be focusing more on student performance, right? Because the growth is going to be a little difficult as we don't have that data from last year, just from 2 years ago. So some of the things that will look similar, we'll continue to utilize Discovery Block to remediate students. We'll continue to refer back to ISSPs to review student success plans halfway through the year to gauge where students are at that January mark, to revise interventions as appropriate. Are students making gains in certain areas, not others, in terms of those goals that were set in the success plan. So that is going to be reviewed as normal during those meeting blocks that teachers have during the course of the year, that team time allows for us to have and look at that data and talk about students. So we're fortunate that we have that. Our RTI team continues to talk about struggling students. That was huge this year, whether students were struggling in the social emotional realm or the academic realm. I think a lot of what the RTI team did this year as well is identify students who were not engaging in their education. So if it was a student who was in remote learning but not engaging, how do we engage the student, the family, and get that student back on track? Or maybe it's a hybrid student that was doing okay in school, but we weren't seeing anything happening outside of school. So there was a lot of looking at attendance, looking at performance, tracking their performance from week to week. And I know that kept the team and my Mike Morrow, the assistant principal, who would review that each week and in reaching out to those students and families. That was something that was new this year that happened, but that was really effective. So we took a lot of care in making sure that students were engaged. And it was more challenging with some students than others. So, but we had some success with that. So the attendance piece was really important, and that's something we focused on. That was a goal of ours last year, reducing the extended absences and focusing on that. Again, a challenge this year, but we still looked at absences and how to engage those students who weren't, whether it was remote learning or in-person schooling. Mostly it happened with remote learning. So providing teachers that time, and whether it be curriculum meeting time or PD time, to look at and continue to improve our transitions from one grade of 1 year to the next. That was big this year, of course, with pacing changing and the schedule changing, but also moving forward next year, talking about alignment, calibrating assessments, as well as looking at common assessments, as well as the pacing in for next year and what we need to be covering and what we need to be adjusting so that we're making sure students are where they need to be for next year. This is the academic piece. Later, I talk about the social emotional piece in the next goal. And also mentioned there just services for whether it be our high needs population, our ELL students, our special education students, and just making sure that programming and staffing is appropriate for the needs of our students. So that's something we'll continue to look at. So again, a list of successes and accomplishments for that goal 1, but largely that focus on achievement, again, for all students. And we're looking forward to getting that data from the MCAS, even though teachers throughout the course of the year have been looking at assessments. Our goal number 2 is cultivate well-being of all. And this was certainly a lot of time and effort and energy spent this year, given the year that we've had, and thinking about what we need to do for next year, which is really important. So some of the changes that we saw this year, and I think we will continue to see next year, and I know we will continue to see next year. So some of the changes in terms of SEL, for example, our guidance counselors created and implemented a Connections Academy. This what was the name for really an opportunity for students to do casual check-ins. These were lessons where counselors would have lessons on things like stress management, emotional management, organization, those types of things. So ultimately providing that support, and as well as some of the social connections. In the second bullet point there, the second piece, I talk about some of the things they tried to do to engage them socially, the wellness weeks, encouraging students to think about their mental health and their social emotional management and having some fun with it. Whether it be Motivation Mondays and Wellness Wednesdays, things of that nature. But I think we talked a lot with the counselors about what next year looks like, and some of the things that we are going to do that we did near the end of this year that we're going to be doing at the beginning of next year are the check-ins with every student. They called them minute meetings. They ended up being, depending on the student, some were very quick check-ins depending on where they were at. Some were longer meetings, and just gauging again their anxiety level, and gauging in what supports they may need right now, and ultimately where their trusted adult is or who that trusted adult is. And of course, if there was not a trusted adult, working through that and making those connections with students. So those went very well. I think that this was a challenge, although the one thing I'll say that the counselors kept reporting was doing this virtually provides its challenges. It's not the same as sitting with a student and connecting with the student. But they found that a lot of students in that virtual world were easier or more ready to reach out for check-ins or engage with them or send that email. And so they saw actually those numbers go up. Or when they conducted the Connections Academy lessons, students were participating, some verbally in a chat, others were using the chat function and they felt comfortable with that. So I think it became more of the conversation. And I think that's what we were excited about is students engaging in those conversations. So that's something we are going to continue. And I think at the beginning of the year, the focus will be surveying students, those informal check-ins, identifying students who need support, and then moving forward from there and continuing that process halfway through the year and seeing where students are at. One of our focuses as well, continued focus on mental health, talking about anxiety, depression, and suicide. We're going to implement the SOS program at the middle school with our 8th grade students, as well as take advantage of Minding Your Mind presentations. We've planned it out in the fall, but basically it's October through December is the time frame of SOS, as well as the Minding Your Mind presentations. I think the key for us is doing that in the fall, which we talked about, doing it earlier in the school year, doing it right away, helping us to identify those students who may be in need, in crisis, as well as providing opportunities for our counselors to have small group meetings and to have follow-up meetings as part of those programs, but using our discovery block and following up with students who are interested in or who need the support. I mentioned student leadership. It's something I think that's going to be another important part of it, of involving students and helping them mentor younger and support younger students. So that's something we will continue. We'll have students a little bit different. We normally train them around now, but we're going to be training those students in September, right at the beginning of the year, and then segue into connecting with students in advisory and so forth. I mentioned the R&R afternoons. Again, I would say this year, it was, I think it was extremely successful, given the challenges that we had. It wasn't the same, again, as physically having parents or community partners like the YMCA come in and deliver in-person sessions to students. So that was a challenge, but virtually we still partnered with those businesses or the YMCA. I worked with Jen Cutler, and she was great reaching out to some of those community partners and providing sessions not only for students, but also for staff, which I talk about in a second. So I think there was a lot of pieces of the virtual R&R that went beyond what we have done. So just us having conversations about how we continue those things, what was valuable. And we know we want the face-to-face back. In every way, shape, or form, we want to be doing those things, but what are those pieces from this year, again, in this realm, that really serviced us well and serviced and supported students well? So hopefully that's happening back in person again, but I know that there are pieces of that we're going to be looking to continue. And I just mentioned some of the staff pieces. So in addition to focusing on the students, I mentioned the R&R afternoons. We had some exclusive staff sessions. In the past, we would have staff and student sessions, but we just provided staff sessions as well. So they didn't have to, which was an advantage. They didn't have to supervise sessions. They were offering their own sessions. And myself, Mr. Morrow, Jen Cutler, our counselors, were monitoring the other sessions with students. So it was easier to do because those groups were larger because they were virtual. So I would say that was an advantage of having it that way. And I think one of the biggest thing moving forward to next year, our goal, our professional development, just focusing on continuing to focus, but focusing on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Excuse me, including anti-bias, anti-racism training, talking with, having conversations with Dr. Kyra, with Kelly at the high school, hearing all the great things that are going on at the high school level, really exciting. And those are really important lessons and I think really important professional development that we need to be seeing at the middle school as well. So that's something I'm really looking forward to connecting with them and preparing that for next year and including that in our professional development. So I'm really excited about it. And I mentioned some of just the successes. I'll just move to goal 3. And fostering a environment based on collaboration, respect, and essentially open lines of communication. And yeah, it's really just us looking at how we're communicating with families and improving communication overall, whether it be the new communication system that we're using to more effectively communicate with groups, and talking about teams of parents, certainly, or grades of parents, but also Claudia talked extensively about it, but communicating effectively with our high needs populations too, like our ELL students. When we've experimented with things like WhatsApp and talking points, and we want to continue to improve that communication, so we're engaging those families. I just mentioned virtual grade level meetings, continue to those communications with students, whether it be the Connections Academy or grade level meetings, whether those are happening virtual, or of course, we want to get back to our class meetings in the theater and be able to get back and have our all school assemblies in the gym. I think those all school assemblies are really important for students to socially connect, for us to celebrate students modeling core values and really establishing what we feel is important, what we're looking for at the middle school. And we need to work on that because it was a challenge this year, I think, with students not, at the middle school level, at this developmental level, not, interacting as much and not having and learning some of those social lessons. So I think we know that there's work to do there. And I know that's something we're talking a lot is just in general, but also as part of that Connections Academy. Yeah, and just making sure that in terms of communicating with families, whether it's utilizing iParent or Google Classroom, however we're communicating student performance, that we're doing so openly and effectively, bringing back some of the things where we're involving community members. I think one of the things that I really missed, was our Veterans Day Assembly, just because it not only recognized our local veterans and veterans in the community and really at large, but really it was all school. It was inviting those veterans into the school. It was a breakfast. It was students sending letters. It was students decorating the halls. It was chorus. It was band. It was something that really, was through the entire culture and hallway of the school. So I think that's something we miss, and we're hoping that that's something that we want to bring back, that we want to have. So we're looking forward to that. I also mentioned just the district communication survey and just what we can learn from that, and looking to improve, whether it's becoming sort of more efficient, more consistent in terms of how we communicate, again, with all families. But I mentioned also our EL student population, because we're going to have to continue to try different things to get better and look for better responses from that population. So we think that's really important. And then I went through and again just talked about some of our some of our indicators and tried to highlight some of the differences that we had this year. Not too much about this year, but we thought it was important to understand, whether it be MCAS or some of the platforms and instruction, understand this year so that we know we're going to keep some of those things moving forward to improve instruction, and as well as focusing on those goals that I talked about, the mental health goals around anxiety, depression, and suicide, as well as focusing on anti-bias and anti-racist education. So hopefully I did that justice, going through some of the key points, key goals, and things that we're really excited about at the middle school next year. But certainly wanted to open up to see if anybody had any questions on our goals.
Thanks, Dave. School committee questions, comments? Anybody?
Dave did too good of a job. We don't have any questions.
Yeah, some great ones with Claudia.
Yeah, when I said that Claudia, that didn't mean you didn't do a great job. So as I was saying, I'm like, that probably didn't come out right. But.
No, but a lot of the things Claudia talked about, right, are things that we're focusing on and thinking about as well, in terms of the MCAS collecting data, making sure we want to see those. We want to be looking at growth again. We want to be engaging all families, and so I think there was a lot of great conversations, and those are conversations we've been having as well, of course.
I mean, I'll share just from when I read it a few days ago to your presentation now, you know, all of the things that you guys are doing over there for SEL, all the different, you know, initiatives and groups. And I mean, they sound wonderful. I would love to participate myself. They really sound great. It's not just, you know, we're going to try to make everybody feel better, but you have real programs and that all the kids are participating in, and it sounds wonderful. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Laurie. And I think it'll be, again, because it was virtual too, and so many students participated, I think the other thing that's going to be great too of being back into school is really having everyone's in the pool now, right? Because it was still a challenge, even though so many participated, you still weren't reaching all students, right? When you're holding things that are virtual. So I think it's really exciting to be able to apply what they were doing virtually to have now these students in front of them, to have that captive audience. So I think we're excited to see where that can go to.
That's awesome. Anybody else? Well, then thank you to the Middle School Site Council, all the participants, and to you, Dave, and to the whole group who put this together. We appreciate you. And it sounds like we've got some good plans for next year from all the buildings. All right, let's see what's next up. We have the Ashland Youth Baseball and Softball Field Improvement Request.
Sure.
And I think it's going to be you, Jim, that's introducing that initially.
I am initially. I think, Steve, I think you're here to have a conversation as well, to fill in if need be. Is that correct?
You still with us, Steve?
Yeah.
He's been waiting a while.
I know, yes. So,
Yeah.
So
you're on mute, Steve, too, when you were talking,
but
there you go.
you're good now. Yeah. So I'm going to preface this because I had a lengthy conversation with Tim McKay with regard to what they're looking to do and asking permission to do. I think quite often when we're dealing with school property and areas that have been utilized by specific organizations over the years, things fall through the crack, if you will, in terms of, you know, what's the process of asking or permission for and or putting any structure on school property. And while we don't have a specific policy within our policy handbook, or at least I couldn't find it, Laurie, you and I both looked in depth. We know that in years past, certainly I keep thinking about Mr. Clay coming and talking about the lacrosse wall here at the middle school. And we've had a process where if someone wants to put a permanent structure or any structure on our school property, it comes to the school committee and they discuss it and take a vote on it. But what it came to our attention is there was a fundraiser that was taking place. And there are two components to the fundraiser, which I think is important to understand. And Steve, keep me honest here if I don't correctly state the conversation Tim and I had, is that we've got Grinsell and we've got Warren, one used for softball, one used for baseball. And as they're looking at making improvements to Grinsell, there's an equity concern in making sure that softball and baseball have similar equitable opportunities for families, for the players, as well as any structures that are placed. So as they're thinking about fundraising, they're really focused currently at Grinsell. It's a lot more challenging as in terms of a site, I guess, at Grinsell from what Tim was talking about with regard to permitting, conservation land, things of that nature. So they've been certainly going through a conversation with the town to figure out how to best put up a structure there. And I'm going to share a couple photos with you in a moment, but just sort of laying out the conversation that I had. Steve, again, feel free to jump in if I'm going down a road that I'm not educated on right now, but
so far you're doing great.
Great, thanks. So again, it becomes the conversation about the Warren School and Ashland Youth Softball and over there, and trying to find a way for families to be able to watch games, to stay out of the road, to be in a position where they can enjoy their children, right? And one of the first conversations that we have to have is I have to have, and I told Tim this, is looking at the site itself at the Warren School and having conversations with John Murray, our director of facilities, as well as Chris Matthew, and we've done those things. And I'm just going to share a couple screens with you because again, this is I want to stress, and Tim wanted to stress, this is not something that's going to be done in the very near future. There's significant fundraising that needs to occur in order for one Grinsell to begin and to be completed before they even get a chance to come over to Warren, from what I was told. Did I share my screen properly so you can see this?
Yep.
What this doesn't show, remember, is we have currently some modular classrooms right here in this aerial, okay? There's another aerial that I could have shown, but we significantly impacted the softball field when we added the modulars. And right now, currently, we have tenting in this area, et cetera. And so they're looking at, potentially adjusting the field, which is fine. It's all there anyway in terms of hitting back towards one another. But this is really the component that I think is really at conversation here. And yes, it's just a little rectangle box here, but it's more about where they're looking at putting a structure. And what that structure would look like in this area. So this is the frame of reference. This is the road that comes in behind Warren, where our parents come in and drop off here. This is let me see, share screen. Just a rendering, if you will, of what they're thinking of doing. Is that correct, Steve?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So it's, it's a covering, and that, again, it goes back to showing the other screen where it is. There are concerns that I voiced, that John Murray voiced to me, that we wanted to make sure that Ashland Youth Baseball and Softball understood permitting, setbacks, who's going to upkeep throughout time. Is it going to negatively impact our space in terms of what we're using it for on a daily basis? Those are areas of concern at least from a logistical schooling standpoint, right? And, John, you're here, we talked about where it's located and, we've been assured, Tim assured me that no, this will be kept up by Ashland Youth Baseball and Softball. It will not be an eyesore. It will not be something that will be falling apart and becomes a dangerous structure. So, I think myself, John, and Chris felt comfortable with where it's being located and what it, again, we don't have the full details of what it's going to look like. They haven't pulled any permits on the Warren area yet. They're focused on Grinsell. And Steve, I'll leave it there if you want to chime in and add anything to that narrative.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just for the record, my name is Steve Clark. I am the AYBS president, doing the work of Tim McKay, who has done most of the work on this, but he was unable to attend this meeting. So thank you for allowing me to join. Look, AYBS has a commitment to the community. We improve the grounds at the school, not only for our baseball and softball community, but also the school community and the at-large community. We are and the rendering there is probably larger than what we intend. But basically what we're trying to do is sell some bricks that would be the floor of that pavilion to go on to have a larger fundraiser to fund more improvements at the field. So Superintendent Adams had mentioned the softball field. That's basically unplayable for players over the age of 7 on that field. And it's created a real scheduling crunch. And so it's less than ideal right now. So ultimately we need to raise some money to move that field around and make that field more playable. The important thing to remember is AYBS already maintains that field and all structures that are there. We cut all the grass, we upkeep the snack shack, we turn the water on, we winterize it, we do everything that's necessary for there. And we also handle the equipment shack that's behind it. And we do that actually at Grinsell, and we do it at Mendez as well. A lot of people in town don't know that AYBS actually funds the maintenance of all the grass cuttings and everything else on those school properties. So we're not asking for any funds from the school department. We're not asking for any additional thing. It's all self-funded, but basically we're trying to build a fundraiser of selling bricks and having a shaded structure so families that are at the softball field can watch softball games without sitting in the sun. Maybe we'll put a couple picnic benches, permanent picnic benches there, or temporary picnic benches, depending on the season, depending on cost. But it wouldn't look all that different from a much smaller version than the pavilion that's at the community center, where families can go and watch softball on a summer weekend or during the spring.
I'll open up to questions in a second. Just Jim already, Steve touched on the process a little bit, but I'll just kind of reiterate that, the reason why the school committee needs to approve it is, number one, it's on school property, but also has to have an opportunity to check in with the facilities director and the superintendent and the building principal and Chris to make sure about a lot of things, that there's no other plans for the property, so that everybody's clear on who's maintaining it, so that it's placed in the best possible position, not just for what you need it for, but for whatever else the school might be using it for. So those are all the reasons why we need to have a process. It's not just you, we've done it with anything and everything that has been, at least in my 10 or 11 years here, there've been a few requests to put structures on school property, and just so you understand why, and that's the process. So as far as I'm concerned, we would be looking for that information from, and I don't know, it didn't sound, Jim, like you've quite completed that yet. Finding out everything you need to find out, talking to everybody that you need to talk to, but that's just a process. But I will open it up to the school committee now for their questions to you of specifics about the project.
So Lori, I do want to be clear. I have had these conversations with, that's why John's here tonight.
Okay, to the point where you could recommend?
Well, we're comfortable. Again, we don't know specifically what it's going to look like at this point. I mean, we're comfortable saying we support the idea for sure. And unless there's, and until an actual rendering of the drawing and making sure that the permitting process, whatever needs to occur, then they come back to the board to get that final approval. But in terms of
absolutely, and if I could jump in on 1 second too, it's a little, we have to put the cart before the horse sometimes, right. And we kind of have to see what we're able to do. And if you look at construction costs right now, it's probably not viable to do something where we're building something right now. But we do have to kind of begin the process and solicit what is the interest in trying to raise money for this type of project. I think the location can be flexible. Again, we were looking at it from a perspective of a softball field. Where does it make sense? Obviously not in fair territory. There's already some permanent structures there with the scoreboard, the dugouts, etc. So it kind of falls in line with that setup, but that's kind of where we are in the process right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think Jim mentioned the lacrosse wall, and that's a good example of what is a typical process where the details are obviously much more vetted by the time they come to us for final approval. But I think to Steve's point, and I think we do this other times with fundraisers in school, like before they go off and do it, they come to us to say, yes, is this okay to even pursue sometimes before they come even back for final approval. And I think what in this case they need is before they actually solicit the funds for fundraising and say we can do this, that we're amenable to the idea of a structure that the details to be worked out later, that we're comfortable with that. And I think that's the delta that's different here from, say, the lacrosse wall, right? Yep. They're not at the same place to come before us for the same approval that the lacrosse wall did, but they need us to say it's directionally appropriate and that we support the idea at this point.
Right. Correct.
Yep. Okay.
I guess I'm kind of at a point where I feel like I don't see any harm in the project. I think what Paul was saying, I certainly want to see the specific plan when you get that far, but understand you kind of need to have some sense that we'll actually be open to the idea, in favor of going forward with it when you get to that point. I can try to say, I am. I don't have a sense. I haven't been over to that property in a while, so I don't know sort of where your little square is, and how it relates, other than just the picture we looked at a minute ago, to the other structures. But I certainly don't foresee any major opposition from me anyway on that project concept.
Tina?
No, I'm totally in support of it too. I think this would be a great addition to the fields there and to the enjoyment that families have in the fields there. Just thinking in terms of the process that we were just talking about, that this would be kind of the initial okay, like yes, where the school committee is on board with AYBS moving forward with fundraising and planning for the project, but not necessarily approving the project yet, because we just don't know exactly what it is and what it looks like. And so just to kind of think through whatever motion it is that we decide to make on this, to if we need to be specific about that and what the next steps in the process are.
Yeah, I think we would have to, obviously we would pull a permit with the town anyway. So I would think the next step of the process would have to be involve the pulling of a permit. And and we kind of go on two tracks. When we're making the application to the town, we would also make the application to the school committee that says, we have pulled this permit and this is what we'd like to do. You guys are the decision makers, but that would be my recommendation as to kind of what makes sense.
Well, that seems like the right process. If you've, Jim saying that he's had those necessary conversations, at least to say that it sounds like, an idea that we can support, and you're not hearing any objection from anybody on school committee. But obviously, until there's like a real plan for its structure, and at least in the past too, we've had the opportunity as a committee to go walk the property and get a better sense of where it's going to be. And so, but as far as like moving forward and then coming back when you're ready to have something actually approved before any kind of construction or installation happens, does that sound to everybody like it's the right way forward for this?
Yeah, and I assume
I would also invite you all to come down and take in a softball game. When you're walking the property, you'll be able to see all the Ashland softball players participating. So
that'd be awesome.
And I assume we can do this via consensus and not actually a formal.
Oh yeah.
If they can move forward.
Yeah.
This is going to help, Steve, for AYBS. If the softball field improvements will help at all with the crunch that'll happen when the construction at Mendez reduces the back fields.
So that's our biggest concern going forward, and that's the conversation with the second softball field. And we will lose 3 fields that we've had access to for a while. And so we're already under a bit of a crunch with fields, but I do think the fundraising process will alleviate that as we're trying to get that second softball field online for everyone.
Steve, I think it's important to remind the school committee, this isn't just about the structure. It's about actually procuring funds for the future for maintenance as well, and of the fields, and so which you already take care of. So.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, we maintain all of those fields, all of those structures. We're a small nonprofit, but we get it done pretty well. And I would put the condition of our baseball fields and our softball fields up against a lot of the other fields in neighboring towns, because I think we do a really good job maintaining them, and I think that provides a benefit to the school and also the community.
Well, thank you for doing that and for having, ideas and the incentive to try to make it better. We definitely appreciate that, just going through our process and making sure that, the building's not going to be demolished next year or anything crazy like that, or some other plan for that.
Exactly.
So
Chris appreciates us taking the mowing cost off of his budget line item anyway. So
we all do. So thank you for that. So consensus to just keep moving forward, and all that we ask is that, anytime there's anything like significant step in the process, if you could just reach out to me, I'll put you on the agenda and you can come back and just let us know where you're at in the process.
Perfect.
And I assume, Steve, the movement of the field is going to involve a new backstop and things like that as well, too, right?
We've run some numbers and had some conversations where we might be able to use the existing backstop. Now we would have to move it, but we might be able to recycle that backstop. We're also keeping in the back of our mind the backstops that are at Mendez right now. They're going to have to come down. So we might be able to reuse some of those resources from the Mendez school and reallocate them to some of the other fields.
Okay, because I think, that kind of falls in the same process. I think we're all in a total support. Sure. So just keep us in the loop on that one as well.
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Steve.
All right, we're good. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one. Thank you.
You too.
Okay, next up.
JPS. She's here.
Here she is. Jennifer Pavia Shields. Hello.
It's nice to see all your faces again.
Thank you for your patience. You've been waiting a while too.
I just want to introduce myself to Tina. I think she's maybe the only one I don't know up there. Tina, I'm the school adjustment counselor at Ashland High School. But I'm also the proud advisor of the Ashland High School Make-A-Wish Club. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if anybody has come before you yet to think about travel next year, but as you can imagine, we are very eager to get back to our favorite place, Give Kids the World. We have had some conversations with Give Kids the World, and although it might look a little bit different, at least right now, they are welcoming volunteers. We won't have the individual shift opportunities that we had last time we traveled there, but there will be an opportunity for us as the Make-A-Wish Club to have an impact in the fundraising efforts that they'll be doing next fall around the time that we'd like to go. I know there's a lot of uncertainty regarding travel, and I'm guessing you guys probably have some concerns regarding youth travel in the fall, but I'm hoping that you'll consider it based on the fact that this would be our 5th trip traveling there, and the consistency that we've had in the past with the same travel agent, and hopefully with the safety and precautions we've had to this point would ensure that it would be a safe experience for all moving forward.
Questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jen. I didn't know.
No,
you
it's
were...
okay. Typically we travel around Veterans Day, but we're anticipating, we don't know officially yet, their fundraiser started around November 13th next year, and we anticipate it being around the same. So we would be actually traveling a few days later than we typically would if we're allowed to go.
Jen, I have one question for you. When do the kids who are actually going on the trip either have to make their commitment or be selected to do that?
So that's the thing. We are very late in the game this year because of all the uncertainty up until recently. we would introduce this trip as soon as we were given permission, and we would ask for a week turnaround in the decision to go or not, with a deposit that would be made to the travel agent. This is typically what we do in the past. The kids have that forewarning, knowing that if we get approval, there is a quick, but there would be no more money or funds needed until we come back in the following school year. At this point, I think the travel agent believes that a $300 deposit would be enough to cover holding the airfare as well as the accommodations at this point.
So, question for you, Jen. We've gone through this on other this past year, we went through a lot of things with travel.
Mm-hmm.
So have we looked at what the reimbursement contingencies and things like that are for this trip? Given that, hopefully everything's going to go swimmingly, but we just don't know. So both from that perspective as to what the reimbursement structure is for it, as well as how much, if there are protocols or precautions that need to be put in place between then and now. Maybe you don't know what that might be, but if you're, say we reverted back to 2 months ago, right? Is that something that the trip would still be viable and things like that?
I think I would have to defer to my travel agent and see what her thoughts on that are. It's actually something we haven't discussed since we started the conversation in the last 2 weeks, but I will definitely find that out.
I want to, if I could pick up on something similar to Paul's question, and just trying to think about the things we don't know. Is I don't know where we're going to be in terms of internal precautions. Hopefully, the progress we've seen recently is going to get us there. But one of the things we've been doing this spring is we've been doing pool testing, and we required people who want to participate in athletics or in-person club activities to continue to participate in pool testing. To me, the travel is a potential extension of that. And might be subject to some conditions, which we just haven't even had that conversation yet.
Well, I did want to ask what I was allowed to do, because we are going to be around the most vulnerable populations with the medical conditions these children struggle with. I would like to make it an expectation that all student travelers are vaccinated.
And so that was kind of where I was going to, Jen, not sort of trying to decide that, but flagging that as, do we need to deal with that question soon? Because if people are going to sign up, they ought to know what they're signing up for, right?
Yeah.
And
I would like to make it an expectation. I just didn't know if I was allowed to do that. But really, it's about not so much us and our risk. It's really about the population we'll be supporting.
Yeah, I would imagine we can, but Jim can confirm with John whether, because this is an extra thing, we can usually put more restrictions on than we can the by right things that have to do with education.
Yeah, I wouldn't think there's any problem there, Paul, but I agree with you.
Are there any, the program itself, the Give Kids the World program, do they have any preference for vaccinations or any guidelines? Because like you said, you will be around incredibly vulnerable kids.
Right.
So are there any programmatic guidelines on that?
At this point, there are not, but it's because things look so differently there currently. Right now, they're only taking local volunteers. They're not taking youth groups. They have a very low amount of families that they are servicing, but they can't say exactly what it's going to look like, but they're anticipating more growth in all of those areas. But it's very hard for them to put in writing right now any kind of expectations. So even with regards to vaccination, there hasn't been any identification of it, but I still think I would feel better knowing that we would all be going there with a little bit more assurance for our safety as well as the people we're there to serve.
I guess what I would suggest on that point is at bare minimum, like I think we can do that, but I think Paul wants to make sure our attorneys are on board. That's fine with me. I also understand you need to be able to move forward soon, or if not tomorrow. And it would, I guess, make sense to me that at least in the communications that go out, we let people know that there may be requirements, whether it's mask wearing, whether it's I don't know how you do social distancing in that program, but or vaccination, so that people can again make that decision, or at least take on a risk of having to bail out later because
Right.
they chose not to get vaccinated, but either we or the program, to Tina's point, ended up requiring it.
Right, like that should be in the initial communication or
Mhm.
contract to all the families, is that any rules, obviously from Give Kids the World, or any rules about vaccination or mask wearing that might be established by the district will need to be complied with, or if you wish to participate in this.
Mhm.
trip.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on something I said earlier, especially seeing as though they're not currently accepting, non-local volunteers or youth groups. So, understanding what it means that, hey, something happens down there, right? Forget up here. They change, they open it up, they close it, whatever the case is, looking back at what that reimbursement is. Because I remember having the conversation earlier this past year about things that got canceled, and
Mhm.
it wasn't pretty what we had to forego. So
Okay.
So Lori, are you looking for a motion that captures all those sort of concerns and caveats?
Yeah, Mark, I would just say, like, for now, obviously the major requirements would be the facility itself. And at this point, it would be encourage, not require, right, from the Ashland standpoint. Knowing that,
I don't know that I'd want to get that far into it. I think it's more about communicating the possibility of a rule, either developed by program or by us, and that they may risk losing their deposit, if they're not willing to comply with that. It feels like to me we need a separate discussion down the road about how long we're going to continue the athletic pool testing. Are we doing that in the fall? And all sorts of other things that are related. So I don't know that telling them what to do, or other than we always tell people it's recommended, we encourage people to do it. I think it's just about in sort of improving this program with the understanding that we're asking Jen to communicate to people all the uncertainties and conditions that may be attached to it, so people can make an informed decision about what to do. But at least that's my perspective on here.
No, I would agree with you, Mark. I mean, if there's anything that, specifically all of you have seen this year, things change a lot and really quickly, and our policies need to adjust. And so if our policy on masks or vaccines needs to adjust in a different way, then I think leaving it open to the district policy, kind of whatever that may be at the time, would be the appropriate way to do it.
well, and not just the district policy, because we might go beyond that for this trip, right? And I think Jen wants, even if we don't require for something else, so I think, Mark, I like how you said it, is that they must comply with any rules that set forth by the by the facility or the district, which and then have something that lists, including but not limited to what Jen's expectations are, what she's seeking right now, potentially masks, potentially vaccinations, and but not limiting it to that list.
Yeah, no, I think we're saying the same thing, Paul.
Yeah, I guess I'll try a motion. I move to approve so we call it Make-A-Wish, right?
Yes.
To approve the Make-A-Wish travel request, subject to communication with potential participants regarding the potential requirements and conditions of their participation.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Aye for me.
Just say for the record, that was probably the worst motion I ever made. Not for its substance, but for its form.
You guys, thank you so much. I feel like this is just what I see as a step back to normalcy. So I'm really excited. I know the students will be thrilled to the gills if this can happen. So thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
All right.
Thanks, Jen.
You guys have a great evening.
You as well. Thank you.
you.
Okay.
Next,
Review of operating budget funds and recommended transfers for FY21.
So we're going to combine a couple. Numbers 8 and 9 are actually going to be part of the same slideshow, Lori. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to, I know it's late and everyone loves finances as much as Chris and I do, but we'll try to see if we can make sure that everything is concise here and go from there. So it'll be a tag team effort here with Chris, Mike, myself, John, et cetera. So let me just start by going through. This come up okay to everybody?
Yep.
So what we're here tonight to have a conversation with are two components. One, ESSER funds, so elementary, secondary education, it's funding that came through the federal government. This is what we're calling ESSER 3. It's the third go around. And then FY21 unencumbered funds for capital projects. And they're two separate items, but they're all intertwined to a certain extent. So what is ESSER 3? What's the purpose and what's the amount that is expected? It's a grant, remember, it's determined based on your Title I numbers. And I did provide the school committee with a quick reference guide on allocations and some key informations, how long you have to use it through 2024. Again, it's based on Title I. Unlike ESSER 1 and 2, there are some certain requirements that we have to meet. And those requirements involve a 20% reserve for summer learning programs, school committee and or before all the use of funds, we need to seek and solicit feedback on the use of the funds. There will be a survey sent tomorrow to the community, which will include opportunities for all stakeholders. If you go back to, is this going back and forth okay? So you can still see this? Okay. It talks about we must include in reaching out to stakeholders, students, families, district administrators, teachers, civil rights organizations, stakeholders representing interests of ELL, disabilities, so ASHBAC, et cetera. So the survey that we've created, we know will meet that purpose. People just have to, it's going to go to the whole community. Michael Herbert will send it out to the rest of the community as well. And then within the survey, it asks you to identify which of the stakeholder groups you belong to. And some people belong to more than one. So that's what's really important to understand, is that they put a lot of conditions on the use of funds and making it very challenging for districts to do. But we think we have a plan in place and why and how we want to utilize the funds. So we're recommending that as part of the 20%, so we're anticipating about $750,000 is what will be coming as part of the grant fund and ESSER 3 to the district. About 20% of that's $150,000. So we're going to provide a summer learning academy for grades K through 4. These are not just Title I students. This comes at a cost of about $156,000. Michael, in his assistant superintendent update, will discuss what that looks like, what the summer learning academy will be, and because we've rolled it out. So that leaves us with about $500,000. So what we're looking to do is, I'm moving people around here, sorry, I can't read my screen, is hire additional staffing at the middle school to reduce class sizes, which one will allow us to provide more direct instruction to students. There are 3 years worth of salary. So again, we have to use it by 2024, about $600,000. This is 5 teaching staff. It does include another special education teacher as well. It would reduce core class sizes from 30 students in the 7th and 8th grade, which is our bubble, these 2 really large classes. But the additional core class sizes, so think of the team model we have at the middle school. These would be half teams, if you will. And, you know, Dave is here to explain if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of what he's thinking, but it's really removing 40 or 50 students from each grade level and creating half teams. It'll move the class sizes down to 24, which is really manageable at the middle school level. And we'll, again, our hope is it provides more direct instruction, which we know with learning loss and closing gaps, that is crucial. ESSER 2, which we received back in the fall, we had a little more flexibility with this. So we initially had earmarked the 156,000 out of the 330,000. So this is where the math, you need to, I'll try to be as clear as I can. We're going to take the 156,000 out of the 330, which we had initially set aside for summer learning, because now it's a requirement to be 20% spent in ESSER 3. We can move that 156,000 forward to help offset the salaries of the core teachers at the middle school. So we anticipated about 750,000 would cover a 3-year window, if you will, for these salaries, these 5 individuals. But when the federal government and the state said, well, wait a minute, now you've got to put 20% aside for, you know, it could be SEL, it could be summer learning, closing gaps. We wouldn't have had the same funding available to support those teachers over the 3-year window, except we can write an amendment to our ESSER 2 and utilize those funds to help offset the salaries. So it's really just taking a component of it and moving it into next year to utilize it. And I'll come back to that. But what have we used the funding for now for ESSER 2? We've spent 10% had to be on SEL. So we've done responsive classroom, the SEL assessment program, implementation, continuation of K-5 literacy training, district-wide anti-racism. Mike, I've lost my, hold on.
Yeah, so these are all things that we have earmarked to spend this money on. So
yeah, but I've lost
the ESSER 2. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just saying I can't. I've lost my mouse.
Yeah. So the ESSER 2 money has not been spent yet, but it has been allocated for these purposes. So we've got obviously that 10%. That was the only mandatory spending for that 330,000. They told us that we needed to set aside at minimum 10% of that money for the purposes of social emotional learning. And that was really easy for us to do because we were going to be continuing to offer our responsive classroom training for our elementary teachers and staff. And Jen Cutler is going to be working with the elementary staff to utilize the DESSA SEL assessment program implementation. So the money is going to go towards that. The other things, as you can see, with 3 buckets: academic, social, emotional, operations. We really tried to condense everything into academics and social, emotional with this money. And we want to continue the great work that was started at the high school. And we're going to be, Mr. DiGirolamo spoke to it earlier, we're going to be moving our anti-racism practices and you know, DEI training to the middle school, and also at the district-wide level to talk to our district leadership team about those anti-racism practices. And we're going to continue working with Claire Landrigan, and we're going to be able to utilize some of these funds to assist in the implementation of the professional development and professional learning that's happening in terms of our literacy.
So in essence, you know, we're meeting the expectations of the grants. That's all I'm trying to get at. But in order to actually fund these positions, which is what we're recommending, and I fully understand that we need to get input from those stakeholders. I'm still going to come back to you most likely and say, yes, 20% has to go to SEL, has to go to, but the rest of it we can utilize for operations and academics, which is teaching staff. It was very clear within the guidance that hiring new personnel is an option for you. And that's, again, we believe here at the middle school that, especially with COVID and again, reducing class sizes is critical. Has been a concern. It's been an area that we've talked about for years. This is the bubble, if you will, based on what we see in seventh and eighth grade of next year. So that's really where we're headed with the funding for ESSER. I'll stop there. It looks like I have my screen back on that. So before we move into anything else, questions on ESSER and where we're headed. And where I'm not necessarily looking tonight for you to approve those positions. It would be great, except I think we do need to get that survey out and get the community feedback, which I don't think, if you talk to Ashback, I don't think they're going to be upset we're hiring another special educator. I don't think that families at the middle school level will be disappointed that we're going from 30 students in a classroom down to 24. But there are some logistics that we need to take care of over the next, really 4 weeks. And I'll probably be looking for the board to vote on the 17th for this component of it, for those positions, after the survey comes back.
Yeah, so, Jim, I guess my couple of questions, I guess. One is sort of on the procedural aspect. I think your slide said we need to have discussed it. 2 school committee meetings.
What I wrote, Mark, was we will be discussing it 2 school committee meetings, and therefore that provides stakeholders with opportunities for posted meetings to come and share their thoughts. I'm adding a survey because no one comes to the school committee meetings.
Right.
But
Right.
if we are posting this information and we have to then, as part of the grant process, right, how did you reach out, or did you reach out to stakeholders? What were the avenues that you took? Right. This is one of them.
Okay. All right. So that was one question. I guess the other one is, other things that may be COVID related that you thought about but didn't, aren't a part of the recommendations you're making.
Such as?
Well, I feel like
if you're asking me, am I focused on PPE? Am I focused on cleaning supplies? Am I focused on those things? The answer is no.
Continuing, yeah. I mean, what I was really thinking about is continuing the pool testing. And
I'll be blunt. I think it would be a waste of our money to do that. I think we will have a better results with our students academically. And closing the achievement gaps by lowering class sizes than pool testing in the fall. I mean, I think that's better money spent than worrying about the pool testing. But again, it's your decision in the end. You're asking my professional opinion. I'm more concerned about meeting the needs of our kids in the classroom and SEL component as well, and closing those gaps that are sure to exist after 16, 17 months of living in a pandemic.
Jim, I just had a quick question. Do you foresee any additional cost associated with that evaluation that you just discussed, in terms of kind of seeing where our students are and really what their needs are? Or do you think kind of some of the current systems that we have in place can handle that additional assessment, or kind of deep dive into where are the student needs post-COVID?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and probably we're going to need more assessment tools, Tina, to really look at that. But again, I go back to the fact that, are we more capable of doing that in that smaller setting and analyzing and assessing kids than we would be with the 30 plus kids in the classroom? And I think we would be. I think it's aside from, and Dave and I have had this conversation, aside from changing and blowing up his schedule, which we believe the discovery, I mean, we have seen tremendous growth. Before the pandemic, the middle school was our highest achieving building in terms of growth, in terms of our student successes. And Dave looks at it and says, hey, that discovery period has been really helpful because there's an opportunity for extra supports that are provided during that time period. But it comes at a cost, right? It comes at a cost where our teaching staff isn't teaching a full load, if you will, right? In terms of 5 core academic classes, which they could do. That discovery block is one of their teaching periods. But that increases class sizes because of that. So, this is my way of looking at, assisting the middle school getting through this time period. But Mark, I mean, I've had that conversation with Audrey and Ed, and I don't know if we feel there's value in it.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I think that the group that I'm, well, look, I think from my comments throughout this meeting, I'm concerned that people are not taking the steps necessary to allow the schools to operate at sort of full speed in the fall, and that includes making sure all the kids are there, right? I'm far less concerned about being in a position of building closings,
yep,
or massive quarantines. I think, at least for where we are now, we hope that we're past that. But I am mindful of, the Warren and Mendez, where kids are not eligible for vaccinations, and whether or not there's a real preventative value there. I certainly understand, given what we've been doing for pool testing and the lack of positives, which is a good thing, right? That, I'm worried of the future. I don't know what it would cost, and my guess is, in the scheme of things, it probably is not that expensive compared to other things. And I'm not suggesting that should impact how we plan to spend our ESSER funds. It may just be a cost that we need to incur with some other source of funds, if it becomes warranted in the fall. So I was just asking the question about, are there other things you thought about and for whatever reason decided, lower priority? And I totally get what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with it. But, I always ask these questions. So.
No, I know, and they're fair and valid questions. I'm just providing my perspective from the educational standpoint. We have the funds, and I think it makes more sense to worry about the social, emotional, and the academic gaps that have been created than I am about pool testing, K through 5 kids. We're going to have 70-80% of our kids at the high school and middle school will be vaccinated. I have no doubt in that. That trend is occurring. And, the K-5 students, I don't know. Pool testing is not going to be cheap in the fall.
Yep, I understand.
So Jim, question on the urgency and timing of the decisions, and how that relates to the outreach, and then I guess a secondary thing of the value of outreach, right? So it's one of those things, like, I know that, certainly just our public meetings check the boxes for the process, right?
Yeah.
But I guess the question from my perspective is there value in the process? And I know it's a loaded question, right? So what are you going to get from the engagement where that would be different than the educational professionals that you talk to routinely, yep, and identify the needs, right? But if there is a value there, are there things that we need that are more urgent to decide earlier, and other things that we could decide later? And if there would be value in saying, after that survey, having an actual forum for people to come and discuss the results of that survey and give and provide input, is there time allowed for that, given the confines of the process and when we need to decide things?
scheduling, hiring personnel, and going through that process of getting the teams together, meaning the teaching teams, is critically important to do now. And yeah, we could put it off, and now we're talking August, trying to hire staff and then redoing the schedule. And
Yeah,
that's what would have to happen.
Well, no, and to be clear, I'm talking about the whole pot being either done now or later, but is there portions of it, like you're talking about, obviously the hiring of the staff at middle school is a time sensitive thing. The earlier we do that, the better that's going to work out. But are there other components of it that are like, okay, that doesn't need to be done right now? And is there value in hosting a public forum? And the answer might be no. And the requirement might not be all that valuable, and going through and checking the boxes.
Yep.
While to me seems disingenuous to say that our meetings here qualify. But I guess it's the balance of, do we think there's value in there? Are we going to get anything different, and weigh that against the impact of delaying any component of it?
Understood. I mean, listen, basically what I'm saying is I'm looking at trying to maximize the funds we have for a number of years. And it's not as though we're getting $3 million where it can be just divvied up. When we're talking 5 teacher salaries coming aboard, that eats up $250,000 a year of it, right? And certainly we could move forward with approving the 1-year plan for those teachers, and then have money left over that we have to write into the grant how we're going to utilize those funds. That's part of the process. The grant hasn't opened yet for us to write exactly how we're going to use the funding. Certainly we have funds left over from ESSER 2 that we could provide for some of the teaching staff already. So yeah, there could be value in waiting for certain components of it.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating for it. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, no, I know. I think
process, you know me, the process seems disingenuous, right?
Well, it's disingenuous from the state level. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it's sort of like, here's the money. Let me put it this way. We have an opportunity for a summer academic enrichment from the state level, right? They just said, here's some potential funds that you can have. You have to do X with it, which is totally against, it doesn't conform with our contract. But yet, if you want the money, you have to spend it the way the state wants you to spend it. We have a better plan. And so we could potentially, and I've talked to a number of superintendents, we're potentially leaving money from a grant perspective on the table, because otherwise we'd have to go back and renegotiate a tremendous amount of our hourly rates for summer work and what the state is asking us to do. There's no compromise at the state level. And I feel like as we're moving forward, trying to develop plans, either we act or we wait and continue to have the state come down and say, in 6 weeks, this is what you're going to use it for. And I struggle with that. I've struggled with this since last March, us making decisions that are solid decisions, and then the state coming on board and saying, well, do it this way now. And that's happened over and over and over again. Again, I just think from an educational standpoint, this is the best use of the funds. It's not it gets us through a couple of years of class size concerns that I have.
Yeah, no, we've talked about it a bunch. I'm totally on board with it.
No, I know.
Right. They're just process concerns and just making sure that, but as Jim said, that the state kind of put us in this position. And if you just play out some of the other scenarios, I mean, I think that even though nobody's at our meeting, the best place really to do it is here, because, you can't just show up at a forum and understand what's been going on in conversations here over the past 3 or 5 years about class size and what's going on in the different buildings, and just these decisions aren't made like in a vacuum. Jim came up with this plan based on things that we've been talking about for a long time, and also how they fit into the crisis that we found ourselves in along with the rest of the world. So I'm not sure there is a better place to have this discussion, because the administrators are here. We've got the benefit of, all the prior conversations we've had, the budget conversations we have all this understanding of information that it's impossible to translate that to anybody else. And the only place for them to really get that is here. The fact that they're not here, I'm not sure if we're responsible for that.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. That's kind of why I said it, it's even a challenge. What are they going to, what is someone who hasn't been involved going to come and provide as far as input that is going to change what we've been talking about and all our educational support personnel.
Right. That's my concern, Paul, that there's some other thing that we create just to feel better about it. But then people are just looking at a list and picking out, and I'm not saying that's all people. I know there are people that watch the meetings after or paying attention in other ways. Jim sends out a newsletter and people follow along. But there are others maybe that just on a whim, I prefer this instead of that. Okay. And here we've been talking about a lot of these things very seriously for a very long period of time, that, with information attached to that has only been shared sort of in this context in a very in-depth all-day budget meeting, for instance. We've been talking to Dave about, the overcrowding for 5 years. So there's all this context that isn't going to be part of any other thing that we offer. And so in some ways that's just disingenuous, because we would just be doing it to say that we did it, and that we're still coming back to this meeting with all of the information that we all have been following along with forever.
I did two thoughts, and I'm just, one substantive thing and then one back to the process. The substantive thing I meant to ask before is, I thought when we talked earlier about the summer learning that we would be identifying kids K-12. I may be just remembering that wrong, but I think the slide you had up was K-4, K-5.
Well, yep.
So I don't know if you could just talk to that. Let me just mention the procedural thing. I guess the thing that I think about that might be an alternative, and I'm not trying to press the issue. I think people can come to these meetings and hear and contribute. But Jim, you've had some success, I think, with doing sort of online forums, different things over the course of the year. And I know not a lot of people. What's that?
The webinars.
Yeah. And so, I think one of the things that does happen in these forums is, right, we have a time for public comment and people get up and say what they want, and then we don't respond. And certainly I think the way Jim engages with people is a more interactive thing. So Jim, I'm not trying to make more work for you. And if you think it's a waste of time, don't do it. But it might be, one other way to do things that instead of having a second meeting or second point on the agenda where we're talking about this 2 weeks from now, other than to vote, you could think it's an option. And I know you've done a lot, you got a lot on your plate, so I'm really not trying to make extra work for you. But if you think that there's any value in that, I guess to me, that's somewhere between what we're doing now and having some sort of forum at a community center or in one of our schools. But that plays, I'm just throwing that out. And I guess I am interested in the question about the summer learning program and what's for driving the K-4 focus as opposed to K-12.
Can we hold off on that until Mike's going to present that? Unless
Okay,
you want to skip over and
Nope,
go right
that's
to
fine.
that's part of his conversation.
Okay,
He's got a PowerPoint on the summer learning. So, yeah.
Anybody else on this?
Okay, so we're going nowhere with it right now. So we're going to revisit it. but again, we have posted the positions as anticipated, which is what we can do. And I still think they're going to be a very valuable positions for us. And we'll figure out through the survey and potential webinar how we, dot the I's and cross the T's, if you will. So let me go back to this though. This is where I think we need immediacy, to Paul Kendall's point earlier. So at the end, and I'm going to try to, Tina, I'm going to try to give you a breakdown as a new school committee member in a very short, concise way with regard to policy and school finance, if you will. And I apologize if you know a lot of this. I'm going to take it from the standpoint that we all know nothing when it comes to school finance. Chris Matthew was learning it himself at the beginning of the year, and he's done an outstanding job. So at the end of the current fiscal year, we're anticipating about $550,000 of unencumbered funds from the approved FY21 budget. So at town meeting, we get X amount of dollars, and then the school committee, so the town votes on just a full dollar amount. And the school committee decides within their purview where those funds get distributed by line item. Fall town meeting comes, if there are additional revenues more than anticipated, we get 70% of that, and we get our operating fund or line item goes up again. So that happens and has happened regularly. So with COVID funding as well, we've been able to move some expense lines, salaries into COVID, which then frees up funding that we had originally budgeted for. So we also had numerous savings for unfilled positions. You've probably read over and over in all papers that people just don't want to work. We can't fill positions. Long-term subs filling in for the year due to extended leaves of absences. We've had, teachers who are at the top end of the pay scale who took the year off, who may have had maternity leave and extended their maternity leave during COVID. So we pay less, although we budget for those individuals, and because we don't know, we pay less for a long-term sub to come in for that position for the year. So there's an immediate savings of money. So COVID funds, ESSER 1 and 2, backfilled some salary lines. And then I said the increase in revenue from special town meeting. So basically it shapes out to be this, and these are rough numbers. We're still closing, Chris is still closing out line items and encumbering, and all encumbering is meaning our expenses that we fully anticipate for the rest of the year. That's all encumbered means. So Warren, we've saved approximately 126,000 in salary savings. Mendez, about 193,000. AMS, 89,000. And then there are other district savings from different line items throughout the hundreds of line items of about 142,000 of unencumbered funds. So if the year ended currently and we had this 550,000 of unencumbered funds, that money, after we go through and close everything out, goes back to the town as it just goes back to the town and becomes part of the free cash number at the end of the year. And then we have a free cash policy and how those funds are spent at the fall town meeting. So what we're asking to do, and I have vetted this through with Michael Herbert. We have conversations all the time about, hey, how do we approach certain things? These are one-time revenues or funds, and how can we use it? So what we're proposing is this. Why? There we go. Is we have two sets of capital items. We have the collaboration with the town, which there used to be a capital committee, if you remember that years ago. But what we do is we submit our capital requests through our department heads, John and Chris, to the town. And they have a working group, and Chris is part of that working group with Brittany and Jen Ball and Michael, and I come in at, at the end a lot, and they prioritize items, and Doug Small from the DPW, and in looking at, okay, what items, one, can be funded at town meeting through a debt exclusion, which we've done, or two, what are one-time funds, meaning free cash, at town meeting, the fall town meeting, can we use for capital expenses? And we had a list of items, and hopefully this works. This is our list of items for FY22. Can everyone see that okay? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So of about $454,000 worth of items that we were submitting for the capital projects as part of debt exclusion and potential free cash, right? So I highlighted the ones in yellow because these are the ones that we're looking to move forward, which I'll explain to you in a moment. There's still benefit of us keeping certain things on the capital list as a multi-year capital program, like Chromebook replacements. If we fund half of it in debt exclusion one year, next year we get the other half. So we have a plan in place. So it doesn't mean let's just, because this list of 454, let's just start at the top and wipe it all out, because there are other strategic ways to spend these funds for capital projects. This is one piece of it. Then, let me close this. Then we have field items, and we hear a lot about, the fields, and the fields need work, and the baseball field at the high school has been terrible ever since it was built, and it has been, right? And it needs to be ripped up, or the scoreboards at the middle school here aren't working and haven't worked for a number of years. The turf needs to be replaced eventually. Well, the track at the high school is already in need of replacement. And typically what we would do is through the enterprise fund, revenues from field rentals goes into this fund, and that's what we would use to offset some of the capital items. Well, that being said, we haven't had revenue for a while, obviously, with COVID. But this is what would look like from the field enterprise capital requests, if you will, okay? So for FY22, and the whole thought process is FY22, this 383,000 would be covered out of the enterprise. We don't have $383,000 in the enterprise fund to cover these capital items. So the track resurfacing, so redoing the track, we patched it up the last couple of years. It needs to be redone. Then middle school scoreboards, baseball, installing field lights. These are items that have been discussed at the macro level, if you will, for the future. So we took, Chris and I and John, we took these lists and said, okay, what are some areas that we can help alleviate some of the pressure on the capital moving forward? Meaning, so in the fall, when free cash comes in and or debt exclusion, are there now items that were out there in FY23 or 24 that we could potentially slide over if we have the funding now in one-time funds to take care of this now? Why immediacy? And immediacy occurs because by law, we need to have these funds not only accounted for, contracted, but materially underway by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. Chris, did I accurately discuss all of those components?
Yes.
Okay. So as we then look at this, what are we recommending for the use of the one-time funds? So what's in the best interest of APS and the town? I'm trying to be very thoughtful of not only the public schools, but also areas that would come off the capital plan for the fields, if you will, right? Because those are community use as well. Are we being fiscally responsible? Have we, and a question I'm sure, Mark, Carrie, you're going to ask, have you looked at the funds and using them for purposes inside the schools as well, in terms of instructional supplies, things of that nature?
For the record, I was not going to ask that question.
Yeah, I'm shocked. But are we looking at utilizing the funds currently inside the schools to provide for students as well? And the answer is yes, we're doing those things and have done those things. But we also feel there are some tremendous capital items, one-time expenses that we need to get done for the betterment of the district as well as the community. One is resurfacing the high school track. We put an RFP out. We know the number is about $140,000. So I put in red, that's part of the capital plan for the fields, right? The sonic firewall upgrade. I'm not an IT guy, but I did talk to Paul Carpenter, and this is because of the amount of bandwidth that we have, our new systems. We need to upgrade our firewall, our protection. Outdated projectors at the high school, believe it or not, they're 15 years old. The projector systems at the high school, they're failing, and replacing them is going to become costly. So the recommendation is, instead of buying all new projectors, there's the old term was a smart board. They're not, but they're interactive boards that can be used with the laptops that our staff has as well. They're starting to use them I've seen them in Pitaway and here at the middle school, but that would replace all of them in the high school for $156,000. We've been doing a replacement at Warren for carpet, taking out all the old carpets. If you remember all our concerns with regard to mildew and in the classrooms and the humidity that exists within that building, finishing off that. Similar here at the middle school. The generator replacement has been on the list for the town and APS for a number of years. John Murray can speak to that if you have questions on that. Exterior lighting and upgrade to Pitaway. That's a safety concern that we've talked about for a number of years, where we would have conversations with our police department about areas of Pitaway that are really dark blind spots, where we'd show up and there's broken glass, beer bottles, other paraphernalia, where our youngest kids are coming to school every day, and not having the lighting certainly was a safety concern. So that's sort of where we landed on this component, and I'll come back to this. But should more funds become available after we close things out? Stephen would say, talking about new scoreboards here at the middle school, we still play a lot of varsity games here, and they don't work. The large gym bleachers have been on the list for a long time in the middle school, locker replacement at the middle school, and to refurbish the tennis courts, which need to be done. And without a true line item for the public schools for capital, we have to think creatively on how we can get some of our capital needs met. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to questions.
Just want to thank you for backing that all the way up for me, walking me through it, and for answering all my questions over email. It was all very helpful.
Yeah, no worries.
So Jim, quick question on number 2.
Yep.
You share a lot of infrastructure and things with the town. Is that a town-wide upgrade? And maybe Chris knows that. So is that something that it's not just a benefit to us, but that is a infrastructure that helps the town as well?
Let me just, I can read exactly, Paul, because Paul Carpenter's not here tonight, but he sent me what he wanted. Our current firewalls were put into place in 2016, were effective for our connection speeds at the time. So remember, during COVID, we actually increased our connection speed and we we actually separated from the town. We added our own, I don't want to call it fiber, but we split so our speeds could be better. We did that with COVID funds. Due to a significant increase in usable bandwidth, our 5-year-old firewalls are no longer suitable. A 10 gigabyte synchronous internet connection was added this year to remain in place, and we're looking to upgrade to a firewall that can make use of the available bandwidth. So it's just school related, is what he
Well,
said.
I mean, that's the reason for it. I'll ask Paul. So
Yeah, thank you. As I told you, I'm not the IT guy.
Yeah, I understood what everything happened this year. So
yeah.
Jim, the thing that stood out to me when I read this, and obviously you guys had your process and you've prioritized everything for a reason, but as you mentioned, like those bleachers have been on that list forever.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a safety issue at this point, and one that should be addressed sooner rather than later?
John Murray, Dave, I mean, we bought some portable ones, correct?
I would consider the ones at the middle school, the outside bleachers at the middle school, the wood ones is to be the pressing hazard.
Right. Not the ones internally.
No.
Right.
And Jim, relative to that, there's also a timing thing, right? So
yeah.
Even if we said that we wanted to, we wouldn't be able to use these funds, I assume, for something like that, because the lead times and stuff probably wouldn't work, I'm assuming, right?
Right, and that's been the struggle, right? Is finding, I mean, John's been trying to find people to do bathroom work at the Warren School, right? Plumbing, and we can't get people in. So some of these projects that we've chosen are projects that we believe we can get done because of the timing of the use of the funds. The outdoor bleachers, I agree. The press box, all of that needs to be replaced. But to me, that needs to be a capital plan as part of the town.
We have that. That's
okay.
We're working through that. Those funds have been identified.
Right. Okay.
So that's why that's not part of this discussion. This discussion is the interior gym, because the other one's something we're just working through.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No.
We're looking for a motion for this, Jim?
I am to approve those items, to utilize the unencumbered funds to transfer from these line items. I don't know if you need specific line items, but to allow us to utilize those funds for capital purchases as they were salary line items before.
Who's got the motion?
Mark, do you know if that's, I mean, if
Yeah, I mean, there was one in the packet that said move to approve the FY21 budget transfers as presented. And if that covers it, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we should be identifying the line items that we're taking money from and what we're moving it to. Because we're transferring, like, approve it if we're just approving the projects from an existing line.
We're not, right?
Yeah, we're not. So I think we're talking about two steps. One is transferring money from point A to point B, and the second is approving the expenditure from point B for the purposes identified.
So I'm just looking at the list. Would a motion work that says to move unexpended salary line items to the facilities and maintenance budget to complete capital projects?
Is it just from that one? Is it that one transfer?
Well, there are a couple different salary lines. I'm just trying to get holistically the number.
We don't normally like list out the individual account numbers or anything like that.
No.
So if its salary is the sort of general category, and then there are sublines for like, you know, Warren, Mendez, I don't think we have to get down to that granular level.
Right.
So I'll make the motion to transfer funds. Do you have an amount, Jim, the exact number that we're transferring?
I would say unencumbered funds of $550,000.
Okay. I'll move to transfer unencumbered funds in the amount of $550,000 from the salary line to the facilities and maintenance line.
Second.
All in favor, Aaron?
Aye.
Tina? Is that a yes?
I'm on mute. Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Aye, that passes.
And
And then I'll
then,
make a second motion to approve the list of capital projects to be funded from the facilities and maintenance line item as presented.
I'll second.
And all in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Aye, for me, that passes. Thank you.
I'm sorry I created more work for John Murray.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, Chris.
So the first document that we had, the recommended of unencumbered funds was for 550. You had that last page that had the additional scoreboards, bleachers.
If we have it, yep.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to, if there's a caveat that goes into that, that if we go above and beyond the 550 on the first page, that then goes into the second batch of funds.
Because of the RFPs that come, they may be lower.
Well, no, because what I'm saying is the first page equal to 550, right?
Right.
So then the second page is that caveat that, hey, if we have additional funding, we have the ability to transfer for the scoreboards, the bleachers, lockers, and tennis courts. I don't know if that's this discussion or not, but
Well, we need to be able to vote on that transfer the same way. And so if
I'd hold off on that until the 17th. After we close out more accounts, Chris. Yeah. I mean, this is what we felt comfortable with at this point. So till we get everything closed out, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that yet.
Okay.
Thank you. So we can get those contracts started tomorrow.
Got your work cut out for you, Chris. All right, Dr. Kyra, do you have a report this evening?
John, you're good. You can go. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
I do have a report. I'm just going to get my screen ready here so I can share it.
And while Mike is getting that set up, I do also want to mention, I have reached out to FinCom as well with the plan that I was presenting to you tonight. So I did not get any feedback from them. But I think it's important to note that I did work through Michael and I did work through FinCom, or at least shared with them what the process was going to be. So
Can everybody see this screen?
We see Microsoft sign-in.
What's that?
We see your Microsoft sign-in.
You do? You don't see
Yeah.
the Summer Learning Academy screen?
Mike,
Nope.
just go ahead and close. I'll share it and then you can walk. You know what I mean?
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, I'll bring it up.
I couldn't see my Microsoft sign, and that's really strange. So you saw
We
you saw
could.
something I wasn't seeing on my own
We didn't
screen.
see your password.
That's very strange.
Okay.
Okay.
Good to go. Hold on.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the one. Okay.
Okay. So, Jim, you can go right to the next slide if you don't mind. We are very fortunate, obviously, to be able to utilize some funds that were offered to us through ESSER to be able to run what we're calling a summer learning academy for our students. To answer one of Mark's questions from earlier right away, originally, we wanted to be able to service at minimum our K through 8 students during our summer learning program. But unfortunately, we were not able to do that. And I will explain that in a little bit more detail as I go into this. But I did want you to know that that was our initial plan. But what we are doing instead is we're going to be offering a really nice, rigorous opportunity for our K through 4 students. And we are focusing on students who receive academic support in the areas of literacy and mathematics. So this was funded through ESSER grants, and it's really aimed at ensuring a mitigation of potential learning difficulties that were exacerbated by the pandemic, but were also present potentially before the pandemic existed. We understand that we have students who struggle and that may have had additional struggles because of what happened during the pandemic time, and kids were not able to be in front of teachers as much as they should have been. So what's going to happen for this is we are going to utilize skill-based instruction that's going to be based on assessment data. Since we are working with K-4 students, we have a significant amount of data we can look at, specifically in the area of literacy. We're going to be able to utilize our BAS. We're going to be able to utilize the Dibbles work. We're going to be able to utilize iReady for our grade 3 and 4 students to see exactly where our students are, and to be able to make sure we're targeting interventions and targeting instruction for these students, and to be able to offer real skills-based instruction for the students during this summer program. For math, we'll utilize Envisions assessments, and we're also going to use any of the teacher created assessments that have been used throughout the year to make sure that we're giving real good targeted assistance. In terms of what we're going to be utilizing for curriculum, it's going to be very much teacher driven, but we will be able to access some great tools, specifically Lexia. We have the ability to use Lexia. We got it for the entire elementary population this year, and it's a wonderful tool for students who are struggling readers. So we'll be able to utilize that software for our teachers and our kids. And we also will be able to utilize our LLI, the Level Literacy Instruction, which is a Fountas and Pinnell program. And our teachers will be able to incorporate those books for our students when they're giving them the instruction this summer. Mr. Adams, you can go to the next slide. So who is participating? We again wanted to make sure that we had as many students participate as possible. However, as you know, we're bound by the ability to hire staff. I'm sure that many of you understand that at this point, we've got teachers who, quite frankly, need and deserve a summer break. And we just did not have the staffing that we originally anticipated that we were going to have for this programming. So based on the staffing that we do have, we decided and determined that we are able to really focus on our K-4 population. And who identified these kids and why are they participating? Well, we worked with our building administration, who really worked closely with counselors and interventionists, as well as classroom teachers, to determine a list of students who they were going to move forward for this programming. The individuals that really helped identify our students are our literacy specialists, as well as our Title I math teachers. Students that are working with those folks have already been identified in the buildings as being students who have great needs. And we wanted to make sure that those were our students that we're targeting for this particular program. Now, while it mentions Title I, it does not mean we were bound to Title I for this programming. This was not necessarily something that we needed to do, but we have a Title I math program, and our Title I math teacher is called that, and she's an interventionist. Well, kids who receive Title I services need that intervention. So there are certainly Title I students who are participating in this, even though it's not one of the necessary components to make sure that you could participate. Again, I said we had limited student involvement due to the availability of staff. So we had to prioritize, and the students that we did prioritize were students who receive both literacy and math support from interventionists. There are many students that receive both of these interventions during the school year. Then the next step was students who received literacy or math instruction and they receive some special education support or some English learning support. And maybe they didn't qualify necessarily for the ESY program, but they still could utilize some additional support. They might not receive special education services in one of the areas of need, but we can provide them some initial support. And obviously we want to make sure that our students who have speak English as a second language are given some necessary supports as well, in addition to what they could be offered through the summer program. The next level would be students who receive literacy or math and are currently in our RTI process. This means students that have been brought forward based on our response to intervention programming and are receiving specific interventions before we determine whether or not they have to have a different type of intervention or eventually even be pushed forward to the special education process. So we can go to the next slide. When is this taking place? This is going to be July 5th through August 13th. It is a 5-week program, Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, and it will begin at 9 a.m. and it will end at 12 p.m. The goal is to have approximately an hour and a half of ELA and an hour and a half of math. Obviously, we're going to give the kids a break. So we're not going to be, pushing them for a full hour and a half in each subject matter. But I would venture to guess that it'll be more like an hour and 15 minutes of good solid literacy work, and then a nice break, and then a good hour and 15 minutes of math, or vice versa, whatever our teachers decide to do in terms of the order there. Also, Jen Cutler has graciously offered to provide some much needed SEL support to our students during that program. As you know, one of the components of the summer learning program that the state has told us we need to do is to offer social emotional supports. And Jen is going to do just that for our students. She will make sure that she works with our teachers to go in and push in to get some SEL programming for all the students that are participating. And then we're really happy that there's going to be some opportunity to collaborate and integrate with our students who are participating in the ESY program through the special education office. And as well as some of our English learners who will be able to be integrated once in a while as they participate in that program as well. So there's going to be some great integration opportunities because we are able to house everything at one school. There are certainly benefits to knowing that our population is going to be shrunk a little bit. And one of those benefits is the ability to really integrate the two programs. We are also providing transportation. So any parent who has a need to have a child transported, we are going to provide the transportation. That was part of the grant funding that we allocated to ensure that we have transportation. And Lisa Bowden and her staff are going to provide boxed lunches for all of our student participants as well. They'll be out of the high school making those lunches for the community, and they'll be bringing them over to us, and we will make sure we're delivering lunches to all our student participants. The final thing that I haven't talked about is the class size and the numbers. And we have many people who could benefit from this. There is absolutely no doubt that we have many other students who are not being able to benefit from this programming that could benefit. But it's my opinion and the opinion of the state as well, when they talk about their accelerated academy that they wanted to make sure we're pushing forward later on in the summer. And Mr. Adams alluded to that. They talked about the importance of keeping these types of programming to a minimum in terms of how many students are in a class. And if we are putting 20 to 25 students in a classroom setting for this type of intervention, it sort of defeats the purpose. We feel like we maxed out at 15. We wanted to max out at 15 students per classroom, and that's who we invited. And we do have a classroom teacher partnered up with a paraprofessional for each one of our classrooms, which allows us to keep the ratio down. But we felt strongly about making sure that we weren't having more than 15 students per class. invitations are out. People are accepting their invitations. As folks turn down invitations, we're going back to our list and inviting folks who may have not made that initial cut to make sure that we are offering the opportunity to as many students and families that we possibly can offer it to. Happy to answer any questions you might have. And we're really looking forward to having a program that's going to allow for students to not only catch up a little bit, but to, at minimum, not regress. When regression obviously happens over the course of a summer, and that's something that we want to try to avoid as much as possible here.
So I have a couple questions, Mike. You actually just touched on one. The first was kind of, in terms of summer programming, often the focus is to prevent regression or, too much regression. And so that was my question is, what is the focus of this? Is this to help the students kind of fill in those skill gaps and make progress forward, just to prevent regression, or a little bit of both? And it sounds like maybe a little bit of both.
It's really a little bit of both. I mean, I want to be realistic and know that the number one priority is to prevent regression, but knowing that our ultimate goal is to really help catch some kids up. I mean, we're talking about trying to be as rigorous as possible with the understanding that we're teaching young kids during the summer when they're not fully engaged, and we have to still make sure that we're making this somewhat enjoyable for them. So we need to make sure that we are trying to fill some gaps that obviously happened in the last year and a half. And that is the ultimate goal. And I hope that we're able to do that. But at minimum, I want to ensure that we are not seeing kids regress during this period.
And will the, especially for the youngest kids, especially those with the reading needs, will foundations be used at all this summer?
So that's a great question, Tina. I don't want to say no, but we don't necessarily have folks that are in the program that have been trained in foundations to teach right now. So we are going to sort of lean on Lexia, and we're going to lean a little bit on the LLI. And that's mainly because the teachers that are teaching in the summer program have not necessarily been trained in foundations at this point. But there will certainly be some strategies, just similar to Wilson-based strategies that will be used. You don't have to be Wilson trained to use Wilson strategies. You don't have to be Linda Mood-Bell trained to use Linda Mood-Bell strategies. So some of these folks will use them, and we're going to lean on people like Lena Minucci, who's a special education teacher, who's going to be working in our program, who works really closely with our language-based learners. I'm sure that her skills are going to become very necessary for many of these kids. But to say that we're going to be using foundations I can't necessarily tell you that it's going to happen.
But knowing, the personnel that you just mentioned, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be foundations. I guess my question was in terms of how are we going to meet those specific needs? Because there obviously will be kids with those specific gaps, right? So it sounds like the staffing you have on deck will certainly be able to address some of those. And then I guess the next question I have is just in terms of, kind of going back to Mark's question, where originally this was, or in the hope of the whole district really was for this to be, at least K-8, maybe higher. There are students in other grades, and then obviously students K-4 who won't be able to be served by this program. So how, what is kind of the longer term plan or the thought in terms of how we're going to address the needs of those students? And what might that look like? And you do not have a full plan yet. This may be evolving, but just curious what your thoughts are on that.
There's not a full plan, but there is money that may be able to be moved away from what was originally allocated for summer programming to after school programming, because that is something that is allowable through some of these grants. So if there is a certain level of savings because we've allocated so much and don't necessarily have to use all of that because we didn't have as many kids, then we can take that and put it towards some really great after school programming next year, where we probably would have maybe the potential to have more people involved. You might be more likely to have a teacher or two who would stick around for an hour and be able to make that happen. with students to offer some of that. So that's one thing that I have in the back of my head. And the other, obviously, is something Mr. Adams alluded to earlier. We still have the potential for that accelerated program that the state is asking folks to apply for. But there's a lot to be considered with that, and much of it involves some interesting things that they're asking us to do with money. So in terms of payment, so there are potential possibilities, but there's nothing that's been set in stone at this point, Tina.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
I wanted to follow up on Dina's because I had some more thought about, you know, what can we be doing for the other kids that we would have identified as hopefully participating in program, but or either space or grade level can't do it. And you know, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of saying, you know, here's a website, work on that. But you know, are there other things that can be offered for kids who need to do a little bit of work to build on what they missed or strengthen some skills? Is there any coordinated effort that we have to get those resources for homework, if you will, you know, over the summer, those kids from whether they're, you know, kindergartners or juniors?
So in some cases, we have certain software licenses that we will have access to, and students can continue to have access to those programs. Some will run out, but if we renew them efficiently and effectively, we'll be able to make sure that they can continue to access them over the course of the summer. And you know, one thing that I know that our principals and teachers are great at is providing different opportunities and advice to certain families when students can't participate. In fact, I had a woman reach out to me, a mom reach out to me the other day whose child was invited and said that they cannot participate. And she said that she had already emailed her classroom teacher, who provided a slew of different activities and things that this specific child can work on over the summer. And she seemed quite pleased with what was presented. Will that happen in every case? I don't know, but I do have great faith that our teachers can do that type of thing. And my office can do that as well. We can provide some good suggestions for parents to work on specific things, especially based on skills that are presented to us as needs.
Yeah, I guess that maybe that gets to the core question of, you know, I don't know whether you obviously had to go through an exercise of identifying which kids to invite first in the K-4 grades. I don't know that the work was ever done, you know, for 8th grade as an example, to say, you know, here are 8th graders who are struggling in ABCD, whatever course it is, and say, you know, these are what they need, and kind of do the affirmative outreach to them and say, look, you struggled with this aspect of the work that we did in ELA. You know, it would really be beneficial for you to work on this over the summer. Or is it sort of more waiting for the family, because it probably isn't going to be the kid, the family to reach out and say, you know, like you just gave that example, you know, what else could we be working on? And that's, and I get it's a big ask. We got a lot of kids and a lot of people to worry about, or just, you know, because it's been such an unusual year. If there's any way to be pushing that agenda, I think it'd be worthwhile.
I don't have an easy answer, Mark. I think you know that. We have not necessarily gone through the stage of identifying which additional students would have been in the program, because we knew that they weren't going to be because we didn't have the staffing for that. I'm sure I could talk with Mr. DiGirolamo and Mrs. Bennett about students in grades 5 through 8 who could benefit from this, and we could, you know, provide some sort of targeted outreach to those families in terms of things that we would recommend, and that's something that we could certainly do.
Yeah, I think that's really, it's not about whether they qualify for the program, but it's more about whether it's at the teacher level, administrator level, what have you, saying student X was struggling in this area. Teacher suggests that they do some work over the summer. Here's a resource. I'm not trying to make it down to the level of who would have qualified if we could have offered it. It's just sort of like, you know, what resources can we be doing? And I know some teachers are great about saying, here's some things you can be doing over the summer to avoid regression. You know, some don't. Just seems like here we've got kids who have really struggled this year, and if we can do something to support them over the summer, that'd be great.
Sure.
Just curious, like for the educators, is it, obviously we all know the kind of year that we have all just been through, and especially how it impacted the delivery of curriculum, but like, is it a given that everybody is behind, or are there instances, and maybe even many instances, where people got the core stuff that they needed to get to start school in September, go to the next grade and be exactly where they're supposed to be? I guess what I'm asking is, what assumptions are we making? Are we making assumptions, or are we getting actual feedback from teachers saying, my whole 4th grade class never learned X? What are the assumptions that we're working with here?
So, I mean,
yeah. So
go ahead, Mike. Yep.
What we can do is really stop making assumptions once we get some specific data to us. And in our end of the year assessments have not been provided yet because they have not been completed yet. So we'll be able to take a real hard look at some of that data, specifically when our spring BAS is done and when our final Envisions work is completed and when our iReady diagnostics are completed, to be able to look. But what I can tell you is I've had conversations with some teachers who have said, this year, I've seen some of our students achieve at a higher rate because they were able to provide a greater deal of small group instruction and change the ratio to a certain extent with particular students. And it was a really interesting conversation that we had. It was with the 4th grade team actually over at Mendez. And we were talking about how they had never before been able to provide so much quality small group. And they felt like there's a certain amount of their students were beyond what students would typically be doing. So I think it's going to be really interesting to look at the data. And that's why one of the things that we did was target students who we've known have been struggling all along and continued to struggle during this time. Many times students who are getting these interventions are able to get intervened out, right? That's the whole purpose, is to provide them with the intervention so they no longer have to have it. Well, these students didn't come out of it. They continue to need it. So that's why we really targeted those kids.
All I wanted to say was, I know we asked this question back in January, or I did, of the principals, and as to what percentage of the curriculum did their teachers feel as though would be covered throughout the year. And it was way higher than I anticipated. Claudia, I think you were probably in the 75-80% range at that time. And Kelly, maybe 50% in certain subject areas, but higher in others. Pete, the same way. So yeah, I don't think we're going to really know how much curriculum was lost this year, and in terms of the gaps, until we get those tests back. But I'd be sure. I sort of think about it with my own 2 boys, an 8th grader and a sophomore, and I don't think if you're looking at just straight Massachusetts standards, I think teachers focused a little bit more on what were the important standards to cover, the power standards, if you will, like we used to look at when we were creating curriculum, and covered what was really necessary. There's a lot of times that that those standards have a lot of stuff in it that really, do we really need to be spending a lot of time on? The answer is no, right? It's sort of identifying really what's critically important. And I would be shocked. I'm not sure at the high school and the middle school where we went to the 4x4 block, how that impacted things, because it was a new teaching model for our staff. Whereas the hybrid model at the elementaries were pretty similar, right? I mean, when we went full back in, teaching staff said, Jim, I missed the private school atmosphere I had, right? I mean, it was sort of, you got 8-9 kids in a class, 15 kids in a class. It was great, but so that's why I think they were able to maintain and stay on target with the curriculum.
Are any of the ESSER funds available for a similar program next summer as well? Does any of that carry over to next summer?
Yes, yeah. So that's, I mean, that's the strategic piece of trying to figure out how we're going to utilize the funds. Like the ESSER 1 has to be used up. ESSER 2, you can roll over for a year, then another year, and then ESSER 3 till 2023. So, yeah. So we're strategically trying to utilize how we spread the money out. And I want to, commend Mike and Kathy as they had to work together. Listen, Kathy knows how hard it is at her programs to try to find teachers for the summer, to try to find nursing for the summer programs. Mike, and now we're competing, right? We're trying to find staff to compete with two different programs. And if you do the math, I think it's 90 hours of instruction, right? I think it's, how many weeks, Mike? Was it 6 weeks at 15 hours? That you're running this program for? That's 90 hours. The state is content on saying, oh, just give 20 hours. We're good. Give a 20-hour week for your accelerated learning. That's what the state is. We're putting in 90 hours here with transportation and food, which not many programs do. So I'm proud of at least the effort, and disappointed, Mark, to the point where, yeah, middle and high school teachers and we don't have the staffing, but I also get it. Listen, my wife's getting on June 22nd, the long trail, and not coming back till the end of July. Like she's getting away. Like that's how teachers feel right now. And to spend more time curriculum planning all summer for 90 hours of work.
No, I'm not taking issue with that at all. I'm not surprised, and I can fully understand the level. Yeah, I mean, it's understandable. It's sort of my question really is more about or aimed at, okay, so if we can't go to plan A, is there something that we can do to help the other kids that really could benefit from it without that staffing? And I understand a lot of times, there's summer work that's assigned, and that's the thing that gets done over Labor Day weekend or the weekend before school starts. And, and it's a fight for parents to get kids to get on, whatever Khan Academy or Duolingo or whatever, right? I get all that. It's just, it's obviously we anticipate that there are going to be other kids who could use support. And if there's a way to do that, then without running the program, I'd love to be able to do something that's directed other than sort of just a general, hey, it'd be nice if you could.
Let us look into that over the next couple.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mike before we move on? All right. Thank you, everyone. Next up, the warrants. And that's me now. So between May 7th, 2021 and June 3rd, 2021, I, Lori Tosti, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $806,022.55. This includes general fund expenses of $509,142.68 and revolving expenses of $250,645.31, grant expenses of $46,209.33, and meals tax expenses of $25.23. I also signed off on $2,200,258 of payroll. That's it.
Good job.
Okay, minutes. May 11th, 2021. That was where the minutes about the meeting that we had about Jim's evaluation. Does anybody have? Oops, sorry, muted myself. Anything on those minutes? I'm not hearing any.
Move to approve as presented.
Second, do we have one?
Second.
All in favor, Aaron?
Abstain.
Mark?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and I for me. And do we have gifts and donations tonight, Jim?
We do. We have 3 here. From Ohio Pile Prints, $31 for miscellaneous, $31.03 miscellaneous gifts and donations. Liesl Martin, $100 to the Helping Our Own, and Aaron Connolly Ranieri, $125 for helping our own fund, for a total of $256.03.
Excellent. We have a motion to approve the gifts and donations
So moved.
Good.
and a
Second.
second. Thank you. All in favor, Mark?
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and I. Thank you. And how about member updates? Who has something they would like to share?
In the interest of time, I'll hold mine for our next meeting.
I don't have too much, but I think several of us participated in the reality fair over at the high school. So that's always a good event. And, you know, many thanks to Mr. Wixer and the student council, in particular, Caitlin, that there's a lot of work that went into that. And I think it was very successful. I joked with Josh. I said he should rename it Teacher Appreciation Fair, because I think a lot of the kids really got an understanding of how much their lifestyle costs. You know, they gave away a little more appreciation for what their parents are paying for things. So.
Thanks, Paul. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, action items are the same. And next, I'm going to move to go into executive session under section 21A3 to conduct strategy with respect to collective bargaining. Actually, I can't see this whole thing. Tell me if I'm missing a word because it's cut off here. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares, and not to return to open session. Ashland Schools custodian and maintenance workers. Did I get all the words?
Got it.
Just looks like it's cut off. Thank you. And second, Mark, thank you. And I'll take the roll call. Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
And I for me. And did somebody send a link for that, by the way?
I did.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So we'll see you over there to the members and to everybody else.
Lori, I sent it as an invite, calendar invite. So hopefully.
Yep, you got it.
Okay.
All right, I'll find my way there. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.